Chapter 888. Pulling out the long sword, the man's body was like a mountain of flesh. He suddenly fell to the ground and died with his eyes wide open. I thought you would know what's good for you and me. I didn't expect all of you to be so eager to die. Jiang Pingji moved her wrist slightly and flung the blood off the blade. Lu Zhao muttered behind her. These aristocratic families have deep roots in Chongzhou. Sister, you killed their people. I'm afraid you've created a death grudge. There aren't many decent big powers in Chongzhou. Are they considered aristocratic families? They're at most a few generations of nouveau riches. When there are no tigers in the mountains, the monkeys call themselves kings. His father had been too benevolent and treated them with courtesy, which had instead encouraged their arrogance. To deal with such people we can only use more immoral methods. Jiang Pingji smiled contemptuously and said, without them I can still support others who are obedient. I only need people who are obedient and sensible. Those who are disobedient and insensible, if they die then so be it. There's no pity. Lu Zhao was embarrassed and did not speak. That was what he said, but who had the guts to be so ruthless? Jiang Pingji looked at everyone's fearful expression and felt much better. She teased, moreover, Zhi and Wenjing have already brought people to surround their residences. If they dare to act rashly, so what if we exterminate their family? What? They received news that Lu Xi had just arrived in Chongzhou. How could he have the time to make such arrangements? Thinking of this, they turned their gazes to Lu Xi. Lu Xi, who was sitting at the head of the table, was indifferent. They had really wronged Lu Xi. Lu Xi had invited them to a banquet today to help Jiang Pingji connect with the aristocratic families in Chongzhou. However, his daughter had already grown up and had her own ideas. Moreover, Feng Zhen and Qiguan Rang beside her were decisive and ruthless people. Others took one step at a time while they took one step at a time. Chongzhou's vermin forces had probably been targeted by the two during the march. Even if it wasn't today, it would be tomorrow. There would be bloodshed one day. It was just that the time had been brought forward. The massacre of the aristocratic families in Hu County had been left unresolved because of Lu Xi's interference. He never thought that Chongzhou would be the target of history. Lu Xi sighed in his heart. Lu Zhao asked Jiang Pingji, Sister, what should we do with the others? Was he going to kill them as well? Since he had already killed one person, it was enough to make an example out of them. They would obediently lend the land needed for farming. From Lu Zhao's point of view, he didn't agree with killing the remaining people. It was not that he did not dare to kill them, but these people were related to the stability of Chongzhou. If he killed them all at once, it would easily cause trouble. Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes and glanced at him from above. Kill him. Initially, he wanted to familiarize himself with the powers in Chongzhou before making his move. Now that he had made his move, it was a good opportunity to catch them off guard. Li Yun and Fu Wang cupped their fists and accepted the order. Seeing the situation, those people knew that their lives were in danger. One by one, they drew their swords and prepared to fight to the death. Unfortunately, they had been pampered for a long time, and the martial arts they had learned in the past were rusty. Their swords were more for decoration than for practical use. Fu Wang and Li Yun were both valiant generals who were adept in battle. Killing these fat and weak people could not be any easier. Blood flowed like a river inside the house, and the shouts of killing outside had already subsided. These people did not attend the banquet alone. They brought dozens of guards with them, but they had all been executed. Looking at the corpses lying on the floor in the house, Fu Wang carefully examined each person to ensure that they were dead before replying to Jiang Pingji. They've all been executed. Jiang Pingji said, I got it. Get someone to come over and bury their corpses. Wuxia was used to it. Lu Zhao had yet to recover from the shock. The audience in the streaming room had a diverse range of opinions. Some of the audience in the red bullet screen mocked that it was too bloody. Some were worried that Jiang Pingji would be condemned by the public if she killed too many people at once. Some thought that Jiang Pingji was a pervert who killed people without saying a word, and some were so disgusted that they went to empty their stomachs. As for the audience in the blue bullet screen, their reaction was exceptionally unanimous. Gonde Ganges Hui, is this an act? Sanqian by Heifangking Si, this is a streaming from another dimension. How is this acting? The streamer really killed people. The audience in the red bullet screen had long been accustomed to Jiang Pingji's decisive character. They were not surprised no matter what she did. The audience in the blue bullet screen was different. They had more or less seen or heard about the content of the former streamer. The content was either a variety of eye-catching scenes or battles in the harem. Most of them were battles that did not involve blood. Even when the scene of refugees rushing to Wanzhou was broadcasted later, the audience only saw pitiful refugees, cruel human nature and a desolate environment. When had they ever seen murder? As for the few times when Jiang Pingji brutally killed the time traveler, the streaming room was forcibly shut down a second before the time traveler died. In other words, they rarely saw bloody scenes. What about now? Several living lives disappeared in front of their eyes. The corpses were decapitated and their limbs were mutilated. Why did the streamer kill them? Was it just because they mocked Jiang Pingji just now? Thinking of this, the sense of justice in many people's hearts exploded. They all sent bullet screen comments to condemn and even humiliate her. Gonde Ganges Hui, B*T. I'm calling you a B*T. You're even more disgusting than the streamer who sold her body. 82 Leifei, I agree. Although the previous streamer was not serious, she only sold herself and did not harm anyone. The streamer is great. She kills people without saying a word. Does she really think she's Long Out Yin? But F***ck her. She's a B***th with improper values. This kind of bullet screen was still considered civilized. The other bullet screens were not clean from beginning to end. Among the group of red bullet screens, the blue bullet screen was particularly conspicuous. Now they directly provoked the audience in the red bullet screen. A few tycoons made a move and directly offered a reward to these people and kicked them out of the streaming room. They started to criticize without understanding the whole story. Why didn't the Virgin Mary ascend to heaven? The audience comforted Jiang Pingji, but she did not care at all. Lu Zhao, who was at the side, said anxiously, "Sister, my sword." It was a sword that he had spent all of his private money to make. From the hilt to the scabbard, it was inlaid with gold and silver and jewels. Jiang Pingji said, "Lend it to me again." Lu Zhao obediently responded with an, "Oh." In the next moment he saw Jiang Pingji turn the long sword over and cut his shoulder, arm and thigh. Blood splattered on his face. "Sister." Jiang Pingji threw the long sword back to Lu Zhao as if there was no one else around. It was as if the person bleeding from the 3 cuts was not her. Lu Zhao's fingers trembled as he held the hilt of the sword. Previously he felt that the sword was extremely luxurious and liked it no matter how he looked at it. Now, however, he felt that it was a hot knife in his hand. Lu Shi, who was sitting at the head of the table, said, "Why did you hurt yourself?" Jiang Pingji looked down. "After killing someone, I have to give an explanation to the outside world. These people have been plotting for a long time. They secretly allied with the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. Under the instructions of the northern borderline, they invaded the people's fields. Now they want to assassinate us, father and daughter. After they failed, they were killed by me. Considering that they have contributed a lot to the people of Chengzhou, they are pardoned and their bodies can be returned home." Lu Shi laughed. "If that's the case, we can't let Lanting bear the burden alone." After saying that, Lu Shi stabbed himself as well. Chapter 889. Sister. Come on. I'm not afraid. Lu Zhao trembled as he passed the sword in his hand to Jiang Pingji. Although he spoke bravely, one could tell how scared he was by looking at his trembling legs and listening to his trembling and broken words. Jiang Pingji looked down at his trembling fingers and took the sword. Lu Zhao looked like he was ready to die a martyr's death. He was just short of carving 2 words on his face. "Come on." Jiang Pingji lifted the sword. The tip of the sword wandered from Lu Zhao's sleeve to his heart. It paused for a moment, then it moved to his neck and slid down his cheek. Feeling the cold blade against his cheek, Lu Zhao swallowed nervously. After a long while he did not feel the pain that he had expected. He did not know when, but he felt his scalp loosen. His neatly tied long hair was no longer bound and flowed down like a waterfall. Lu Zhao opened his eyes in shock. He raised his hands and grabbed his hair that was draped over his shoulders. He suddenly said, "Sister?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Look at how afraid you are of pain. I won't bully you anymore. Keep your sword." As she finished speaking, she twirled the sword in her hand and accurately threw it back into the scabbard at Lu Zhao's waist. He was so scared that his whole body froze. If she had thrown it crooked just now, one of your brother's kidneys might have been gone. She was really his sister. Lu Zhao hurriedly climbed up from the ground and saw that Jiang Pingji's luxurious clothes were soaked with blood. Blood was still flowing out. He felt pain just by looking at it. He really did not know what kind of mentality she had. Why was she so cruel to herself? The 3 wounds were long and deep and blood flowed out like it was free. At this rate, wouldn't he die of blood loss? Sister, let's find a doctor to stop the bleeding first. Lu Zhao casually asked with concern. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and tore off a few pieces of his sleeve. She used one hand to bandage the wound neatly. There's no need. You go see father first. I still have to deal with matters outside. Lu Zhao looked at his sleeve. He wanted to cry but had no tears. For a noble's son who loved extravagance, clothes were the most precious thing to him. Lu Zhao's luxurious clothes were newly made a few days ago. He liked them very much when they were fresh out of the oven. It wasn't easy for him to wear it, and he hadn't even had enough of it when his clothes were ruined by his elder sister. How could he not be distressed? However, now was not the time to feel sorry for his clothes. Upon hearing Jiang Pingji's words, he quickly tore 2 strips of cloth from his sleeves and walked to Lu Xi's side to help him wrap up his wounds. Compared to Jiang Pingji's cleanliness, Lu Zhao was clumsy. Not only did he not stop the bleeding, but he also worsened Lu Xi's wound. Knowing that he had messed up, Lu Zhao anxiously knelt beside Lu Xi and watched him tend to his wounds. Follow your elder sister and learn well. If you have 30% of her ability, I won't have to worry about your future. Because he had lost a lot of blood, Lu Xi's cheeks looked very pale, and his forehead was covered with fine sweat. Lu Zhao listened obediently, not daring to disobey Lu Xi. I have learned from you. I will definitely learn from you humbly. Although the 2 were father and son, Lu Zhao had only seen each other a few times over the years. They were either separated by courtyard walls, fake mountains or windows, or separated by a sea of people. He could only catch a glimpse from afar each time. They had too little contact, so their relationship was naturally distant. Because Lu Xi was unreachable, Lu Zhao had a natural fear of him. He could still act pitiful in front of Jiang Pingji, but if he dared to act pitiful in front of Lu Xi, he would be skinned alive. Jiang Pingji walked out of the hall and came face to face with Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen. However, the joy on their faces did not last long. When they saw that half of Jiang Pingji's clothes were soaked in blood, their expressions changed. If Jiang Pingji had appeared in front of them in such an appearance, they would not have suspected that the blood was hers. But now they were sure that the owner of the blood was their lord. Lord, why did you hurt yourself like this? Feng Zhen strode forward, the relaxed expression on his face replaced by seriousness. He could not help but think of Wei Xiai, who was far away in Shangjing. If that person saw it, he might have some reaction. Jiang Pingji said nonchalantly, "It's just a few cuts. I didn't lose an arm or a leg. Why are you so worried?" Feng Zhen choked, feeling that all his concern had been fed to a dog. How did he meet a lord who loved to court death? Feng Zhen said, "A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. My lord, you should not put yourself in danger." Qiguan Rang sensed something else, and his gaze revealed some worry. Jiang Pingji walked out of the manor and said, "It's just 3 cuts. It's better than losing your life in the future." Qiguan Rang turned his head to look at the hall. People kept coming out with stretchers, thick drops of blood dripping from them. "Lord, you..." Qiguan Rang inhaled a breath of cold air. His lord had killed all the leaders of the aristocratic families in Chongzhou. According to their initial plan, it should have been mainly to intimidate them. They did not expect their lord to be so ruthless. Jiang Pingji said, "So be it. They are useless stumbling blocks. It's too easy for them to just kick them away. They should be ruthlessly crushed." Kicking the stumbling block to the side was too light a punishment for the stumbling block. Perhaps one day these stumbling blocks would appear on her path again. In Jiang Pingji's opinion, rather than wasting time moving them away, it was better to crush them into powder from the start. At this moment, Jiang Pingji's hidden murderous nature was completely revealed. Unlike the intense murderous intent on the battlefield, she was now a decisive leader. She did not need to personally participate in the battle. Every step she took made people feel the strong and determined will in her heart. Those who stood in her way would be killed without mercy. Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen, who were following behind Jiang Pingji, looked at each other. They both saw something in each other's eyes. They could only blame their lord for being too confusing. Not only could she get along well with her subordinates, but she could even celebrate with the people. She did not put on any airs at all. At this moment, Li Yun had already cleaned up the troops brought by the aristocratic families. He came over to report to Jiang Pingji. Lian happened to hear their conversation. Worry surfaced in his heart. He said, "The people my lord killed were the heads of the various aristocratic families in Chongzhou. If there is no reasonable explanation, I'm afraid they will not let it go. If they go around slandering my lord and killing indiscriminately." Feng Zhen, who was at the side, listened and smiled without saying a word. Why did Jiang Pingji harm herself? Wasn't it to have a legitimate reason to kill those people? Since they dared to urge their lord to go head-to-head with the aristocratic families in Chongzhou and catch them off guard, they naturally had a comprehensive plan. Qiguan Rang was more familiar with the affairs of Chongzhou. He laughed contemptuously and said, "You don't have to worry about this. We have already surrounded all the mansions. What we need to do now is to strike first and make them speechless. As long as we can prove that they are colluding with the nobles of the northern borderline, not to mention killing 1 or 2 people, even if we kill their entire clan, the scholars in the world will not dare to criticize my lord." Chapter 890. A few years ago, the various aristocratic families in Chongzhou took advantage of the pressure of the northern borderline army to spread rumors and slander. They used trickery and robbery to snatch away the land and houses that the people relied on to make a living from their hands, forcing them from good citizens to become refugees. How many lives were lost? This kind of method was not a big deal for landowning households. After all, land was wealth and no one would complain about having more money. But no matter what, this was a despicable bandits' method. Aristocratic families were very prideful. Even if they had done something like bandits, they would never admit it. In other words, the method of land acquisition was an unspoken rule that could only be understood and not explained. Because of this, Jiang Pingji could make a countercharge and make the aristocratic families of Chongzhou speechless. She said that the aristocratic families of Chongzhou and the royal court of the northern borderline were flirting with each other, and even under the instructions of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, they wantonly seized the land of the people of Chongzhou in preparation for the army of the northern borderline to enter Chongzhou. Logically speaking, there was nothing wrong with these words. She only needed to use this reason to fabricate a few forged letters to the enemy. In addition to the wounds on Lu Shi and Jiang Pingji, it would be enough to make the aristocratic families in Chongzhou suffer in silence. After all, more than 90% of Chongzhou's farmland had indeed been divided up by them. It was irrefutable evidence and he couldn't deny it even if he wanted to. Of course, this was only a battle at the level of public opinion. The decisive factor was still the army. If these aristocratic families dared to truly rebel against her, she would dare to massacre them all. She wanted to see whether the lives of 1 or 2 people in their fields were more important, or the lives of their entire clan. Jiang Pingji walked out of the mansion. She looked up at the dark sky, and the corners of her mouth curled into a silent, mocking smile. At this moment, Chongzhou had truly changed. Within the borders of Chongzhou, the wind was howling and the cranes were panicking. Shangjing, which was half a month's journey away, was calm and peaceful. "Zixiao, why are you still awake at this hour?" Zhang Ping came out wearing a thick coat. He could vaguely see a tall figure standing in the garden. At first he was shocked. With the help of the faint moonlight, he took a closer look. Only then did he realize that it was not Ghost Shadow but Wei Ci. Wei Ci heard someone calling his name. He turned around to take a look and said in a hoarse voice, "Shiheng." Judging from his voice, Wei Ci must have gotten up halfway and ran to the courtyard to look at the astrology. "It took you 2 years to get better. Why don't you cherish it?" Zhang Ping felt like an old maid nagging, "Aren't you afraid of catching a cold wearing such thin clothes? Look at your pale face, you can scare people to death in the middle of the night." If Wei Ci were to fall ill, the heavy responsibility would fall on his and Xiao Guang's shoulders. It would be exhausting. Wei Ci thanked Zhang Ping for his kindness. He took a deep breath and the cold air poured into his lungs, causing him to shiver from the cold. "Put it on, don't fall sick again." Zhang Ping took the initiative to give up his cloak. "I've seen you standing in the yard for a while. What are you looking at?" "The light of the Emperor star in the north is getting more and more dazzling, and there's a faint blood-red glow." Wei Ci was halfway through his sentence and refused to continue, causing Zhang Ping to roll his eyes. He hated people who didn't finish their sentences. "Is this an auspicious or ominous sign?" Zhang Ping asked. He did not understand astrology, but as Master Yuan Jing's disciple, Wei Ci had more or less learned the true teachings and had some skills. "Auspicious. There's a small ominous in the auspicious, but it doesn't matter. Wuxia smiled and coughed twice. Under the moonlight, his eyes were like thick ink with a different kind of purity. Zhang Ping said, "In that case, my lord's situation in Chongzhou is not bad?" Wuxia said, "Just from the astrology it should be good, but I'm still a little worried." Zhang Ping laughed and teased, "What are you worried about? My lord is protected by both civil and military people. Whether it's Wenjing, Zisher, Fu Jingtu or Han Mei, they are all outstanding people. Not many people can go around them and hurt my lord, right? Zixiao, you're being too worried." Rather than worrying about this, it was better to go back to the house and rest early. There was still a lot of work tomorrow. "No, you don't understand." Wuxia suddenly remembered Monk Liaochen's words. Many years had passed. Wuxia would record the astrology whenever he was free. Just as Monk Liaochen had said, the change in the Emperor's aura was indeed strange. According to my lord's actions all these years, the increase in the Emperor's aura should be showing an upward trend. However, when Wuxia sorted out the data he had recorded, he was surprised to find that the growth trend had become a strange slanted upward wave pattern. In other words, the Emperor's aura had indeed been stolen by someone, and the frequency of the theft was rather stable. Until now, the demon who stole the Emperor's aura had not been caught. He was really worried. How could mortals fight against unnatural creatures? Even someone as tyrannical as his lord could not do it. Thinking of this, Wuxia felt that he should find some time to visit some capable people and see if they had any news. The night wind was chilly. He stayed in the courtyard for a while before turning back to the house and falling asleep under the influence of drowsiness. After sleeping for about 2 hours, he suddenly got up from the bed. His expression was somewhat terrified, but the tips of his ears were slowly becoming bloodshot. Why did he suddenly dream of the Lord? Recalling the scene in his dream, Wuxia was worried and angry. He was worried because he dreamed that his lord was dressed in a noble lady's dress. Bright red blood dyed half her body and her wounds were still bleeding. His heart wrenched at the sight of it. However, he could not speak in the dream. He could only look at her with the cold expression that he had been familiar with for half his life. He was angry and embarrassed. Why did she seem to be able to see him in the dream? She brushed her fingers from his collarbone to his cheek, and even lingered on his lips for a long time. They clearly did not touch, but Wuxia had the illusion that his lips were touching her ice-cold fingertips. Wuxi's previous and current lives added together would not make him young. He could not help but find it funny. Someone so old actually had such an absurd dream. Although it was absurd. But it was somewhat real. Wuxia put away that strange feeling, laid down again and fell into the dream. This time he did not have any strange dreams. He slept until dawn. In Chongzhou, Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue and retracted her hand with some regret. She had been wondering when the yin-yang jade would take effect by Wuxi's side. She did not expect to see it today. Jiang Pingji used the ashes of the woman from another world to exchange for the yin-yang jade from Xianxia. If it was in her previous life, this thing could cause the interstellar forces to fight over it. In this world, it was basically useless. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji was quick-witted and gave it to Wuxia. She was sure that as long as it was something she gave to Wuxia, even if he did not carry it with him, he would still keep it properly. Just now, when she faintly saw Wuxi's shadow, she knew that it was the real thing. The effect was excellent. However, besides Jiang Pingji, it seemed that no one could see Wuxia. Chapter 891. Before the Hongmen banquet began, Chongzhou was still calm and peaceful. If one was more sensitive, they would realize that this was just the calm before the storm. The noble ladies of each household were busy with their own affairs. Some handled household chores, served in-laws, educated their children, beat up their concubines and played with antiques. The seemingly peaceful backyard was, in fact, surging with undercurrents. Everyone was scheming for their own benefit. Banquets were an important channel for the gentry to connect. There was not a single day of rest. Today one family would host a gathering. Tomorrow, another family would host a poetry meeting. The day after, they would send out invitations and everyone would admire the flowers and the moon together. The men went out as guests. The women in the backyard did not want to be outdone and often went out to attend banquets. The moonlight in the sky was cool. The shadows of people on the ground flickered. Their clothes were fragrant and their hair was silhouetted. Although the gentry of Chongzhou were criticized by the outside world as nouveau riche, They had decades or even centuries of history. They were far wealthier than the common people. The weather was cold, but the yard where the banquet was held was warm. There was not the slightest bit of chill. A few of the ladies who were close to each other joked. The content revolved around their husbands, their concubines, mothers-in-law, fathers-in-law, illegitimate sons and daughters, as well as the gossip of each household. Most of it was nonsense about family affairs. There was not much substance to it. But when they gathered together to complain, even the most boring topic could become interesting. As they talked, they mentioned Lu Shi, the governor of Lu Prefecture, who was in his prime. The topic got further and further away. Lu Shi was in his prime. He only had one illegitimate daughter and one illegitimate son. His second wife lived apart from him for a long time. Ever since Lu Shi came to Chongzhou, many people planned to use honey traps and tried to stuff women into Lu Shi's backyard. But he was slippery. No matter what others said or hinted, he always had a way to block the women sent by others. The men said that Lu Shi was pretending to be serious, but the ladies of Chongzhou respected him. Which ancient woman did not want her husband to only love her and have a woman in his backyard? At least before Gu Min passed away, Lu Shi's backyard only had such a person. Just this relationship was enough for them to be jealous and envious. Every time this topic was brought up, the noble women of Chongzhou would be extremely jealous of the deceased Gu Minfen. They would say that she died young, and in the end, they would fakely sigh about the unfortunate fate of a beauty. After saying that, a good man like Lu Shi couldn't help but complain about his flirtatious husband. No matter if they were lowly concubines or noble concubines, he took them in one by one. The main wife had to pretend to be magnanimous on the surface, but she also had to address those coquettish sluts as sisters. It was disgusting. I heard that the daughter of the Lu Prefecture overseer is coming. Today's banquet is for that girl. It was unknown which Furen had blurted this out, but the reactions of the other Furens were very calm. Some of them even secretly sneered. She's just a little girl. How is she worthy of being treated so seriously by a man? In the eyes of many ladies, Jiang Pingji's arrival coincided with Lu Shi's invitation to the aristocratic families. After all, she was just a woman. No matter how capable she was, she would still have to marry and have children. She would have to stay in the backyard and do housework for a man for the rest of her life. For Lu Shi's daughter to be able to become Wanzhou's governor was already very impressive. They didn't think that Jiang Pingji could go any further. They even thought that she was a little silly. It would have been better if she had obediently enjoyed her father's protection and lived a carefree life as a noble daughter of an aristocratic family. Instead, she had to show her face in public and imitate Master Su of the previous dynasty. What would happen in the end? She might not be able to compete with the men, and she would have wasted the most important years of a woman's life for nothing. As for the rumors that Lu Shi was going to retire behind the scenes and give power to Lu Shi, that was even more ridiculous. This kind of unrealistic news will make people laugh if I say it. That's true. She's just a girl in the boudoir. How capable can she be? I heard that girl Lu is already 18 years old. She's still not engaged at this age. Won't she be an old lady in 2 years? The Lu Prefecture overseer is quite concerned about this daughter of the official wife. He should be keeping an eye out for her, right? However, a girl who hangs around outside all day. I heard that she often hangs out with those uncouth peasants. Who would dare to have a daughter-in-law like her? Even if he treats her well for the sake of the Lu Prefecture overseer, a father-in-law can't simply interfere with his son-in-law's backyard. In my opinion, that girl Lu, this topic was very new to them. For a moment they were talking enthusiastically, and unknowingly the topic had strayed. A young madam said, "Could it be that the Lu Prefecture overseer's banquet is for the marriage of this daughter of the official wife?" Lu Shi's influence was in Chongzhou and Hu County. For the sake of his daughter, he would definitely choose a son-in-law within his sphere of influence. Many people felt that this speculation made sense. If a reasonable person had heard their conversation, he would probably laugh his head off. If the matrons of Chongzhou's aristocratic families were all like this, it was estimated that it would not be passed down for more than a few generations. Chongzhou was close to the northern borderline, and the war between the two countries continued. Because of environmental factors, the powers here changed very quickly. The so-called aristocratic families were, to put it bluntly, nouveau riche families that lacked heritage. Taking some of the madams present as an example, their maiden families were butchers. They were illiterate and naturally their knowledge was shallow. Of course, other than their lack of knowledge, the more important reason was that they did not care about the outside world. If they had the time to care about those things, they might as well spend it on cosmetics, jewelry, and silk. The noble women chatted and laughed, and the atmosphere of the banquet heated up. It was at this moment that two lavishly dressed maids rushed in. Their appearance caused everyone to look askance. It was as if they were asking with their eyes, "Which family are they from? Why are they so rude?" One of the noblewomen recognized her personal maids, and her face, which was covered in makeup, instantly grew long. She was hosting the banquet today and it was going well. She did not expect that her own maids would run into trouble. Before she could reprimand them, the two maids told her a piece of news that made her black out. "Madam, bad news. The master has gone." The noblewoman's heart tightened and she scolded them sternly, "Take them away and slap their mouths. Is the master someone you two little bitches can make fun of?" The older maid said, "It's true, madam. There are many soldiers outside and they even brought back the master's corpse." What? This news was like a heavy hammer. Her eyes darkened and her body, which had just stood up, almost fell to the ground. When everyone heard this news, they all lost the mood to fool around. They prepared to observe the situation and then find a chance to leave. However, they did not expect that the same bad news was waiting for them. The originally bustling backyard suddenly became deserted. Chapter 892. He was fine not long ago. How did he get into trouble now? Who did this to him? The noblewoman's eyes were red from crying. Her tears washed away the heavy makeup on her face, leaving two streaks. The noblewoman was not the only one crying. Her children kneeling beside her were crying too. Not far away there were 5 or 6 children born of concubines who were crying even more heartbroken. Old Master Lu and Old Madam, who rushed over after hearing the news, almost fainted from crying. "Who did this to my son? Mother's son." The hall was a mess. The noblewomen who came to attend the banquet all looked embarrassed. Obviously this was not a good time to say goodbye. A few noblewomen who had conflicts with that madam saw the situation and could not help but secretly cover their mouths with handkerchiefs to hide their smiles. They had only been gloating for a few seconds when their servants brought terrible news. Their husbands had died and their residences were surrounded by heavy troops. How could this be? The people who were gloating could not laugh anymore. Their expressions were frozen in a twisted angle, looking especially strange. They reacted the same way as the noblewoman before them. They suspected that the servants had spread the news wrongly. When the truth was placed in front of them, they cried even more heartbreakingly than the noblewoman before them. How could they care about their manners? For a moment they had the same thought in their minds. Who killed their husbands? Who else could it be? After asking around, they knew how their husbands had died. They plotted to murder the 2 Lu governors, secretly colluded with the nobles of the northern borderline, and attempted to overthrow Chongzhou with the northern borderline. However, the winner takes all. They failed at the last step. Their plan had been seen through by Madame Lu and Madame Lu in advance, and they had been killed instead. If the dead man had not been their husbands, they would have believed it. Lu Zhongqing, this is unfounded slander. Our ancestors were all citizens of Chongzhou. How could we collude with the northern borderline? This is clearly the Lu father and daughter who wanted to monopolize power. That's why they killed my husband with a groundless accusation. Slander. All slander. The noblewomen cried and shook their heads. Those who were mentally strong endured the pain and tried to stabilize the situation in the residences. Those who didn't have much ability sat on the ground and cried. The entire mansion was in a mess like headless flies. No matter how much they cried and made a fuss, the soldiers surrounding the mansion refused to back down or retreat. Some sent servants to resist, but they were immediately killed by the soldiers. Seeing this, they finally stopped for a while. After making a ruckus for most of the night, the matrons and elders of the various clans united to demand an explanation from Lu Shi. They did not like Lu Shi because Lu Shi was an outsider. The more power he had, the less benefits the Chongzhou aristocratic families would receive. Even so, they wouldn't do anything to Lu Shi. After all, he still had soldiers in his hands. Of course, they didn't take action not because they were merciful, but because Lu Shi was powerful. If Lu Shi did not have soldiers in his hands, not to mention being the magistrate of Chongzhou for a few years, even the grass on his grave would be as tall as a man. They hadn't done anything before, and it was even more impossible for them to do anything now. One Lu Shi was already hard enough to deal with. Now Lu Shi, who had more than 10,000 soldiers and horses with him, was even harder to defeat if the father and daughter joined forces. Even if they wanted to plot against Lu Shi, they had to wait until Lu Shi retreated behind the scenes before joining forces to bully the young Lu Shi. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that they wouldn't hurt Lu Shi and his daughter. Why would they assassinate them at such a sensitive time? It was obvious that someone had purposely set them up. Every family's mansion was heavily guarded. Apart from the matrons and elders who could enter and leave, everyone else was blocked. This was a clear house arrest. Seeing this, everyone was so angry that their faces turned red. They looked at Lu Shi with murderous intent. "Magistrate Lu, I hope you can give us an explanation for the massacre of the gentry last night. Even if you are the magistrate, you can't kill the innocent." A prestigious elder spoke. He was older than Lu Shi, so he didn't hold back when he questioned him. Lu Shi raised his hand weakly. Jiang Pingji, who was beside him, sneered and said, "Do you need me to give you a reason? Plotting to kill a magistrate is a crime that warrants the execution of 9 generations. I've been merciful by not coming to settle the score with you personally. I didn't expect you to come here and complain first. You're indeed the local tyrant of Chongzhou. You're unscrupulous. You've really opened my eyes." The elder glanced at Jiang Pingji, who was dressed in women's clothing, and said with contempt, "What right do you have to speak here?" Jiang Pingji said, "I am the magistrate of Wanzhou. Do you think I have the right? The aristocratic families of Chongzhou really had a good plan. You actually wanted to capture me and my daughter to claim credit from the royal court of the northern borderline. If I didn't have capable people protecting me by my side, I would have been beheaded by now." The elder saw that Jiang Pingji was insisting that the aristocratic families of Chongzhou were up to no good. He was so angry that his blood pressure almost skyrocketed. "This is all slander." Jiang Pingji sneered. "Slander? How is it slander? You mean to say that I and my father purposely stabbed ourselves with a knife to slander you? Since you refuse to admit it, I'll show you the evidence." Someone said, "How can injuries be faked? Who knows if this is a conspiracy between you and your daughter?" Jiang Pingji said, "What's the use of quibbling? Show me the evidence. Let's see if you admit it or not." Having said that, Jiang Pingji waved her hand outside. A doctor carrying a medical box came forward. The man's hair and beard were all white. He was no stranger to everyone. The doctor's medical skills were superb. He was a doctor employed by the aristocratic families of Chongzhou. He had a close relationship with each family. Jiang Pingji's and Lu Shi's injuries were also treated by him. He knew the condition of their injuries the best. The doctor trembled as he told the truth. Lu Shi's injuries were relatively light, but Jiang Pingji's injuries were very serious. The 3 wounds were all close to vital parts. Who would risk their own lives for the sake of framing someone? At that moment, Li Yun brought people over. The people behind him carried dozens of big boxes. He nodded at Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji received the hint and sneered in her heart. "These things were all found in your residence." As soon as she said the first sentence, the faces of the dozens of people below changed. They had just stepped out of the door when the soldiers outside barged in. They looked as if they were confiscating property. Jiang Pingji continued, "Take a look. Do these things belong to you?" The boxes were opened one by one. They were filled with bamboo slips, account books, land deeds, and a few letters. Chapter 893. Jiang Pingji's words were powerful and resonant. She spoke 90% truth mixed with 10% falsehood, forcibly turning black and white upside down. The group of people who were arrogant just a moment ago now seemed to be strangled by invisible hands. Their expressions were strange and comical. "Why? Did I say anything wrong?" Jiang Pingji had a cold smile on her face. Her emotionless eyes glanced at them. They didn't know if it was because they had a guilty conscience, but they always felt that Jiang Pingji's gaze was dense and sharp. They didn't dare to look her in the eye. Whoever she glanced at, that person would look away uncomfortably. Jiang Pingji sneered. "Stacks of land deeds, books of accounts, and secret letters of treason. All of them were found in your residences. Why don't you tell me who they belong to? Why did they grow legs and come to your residences?" Everyone's faces were ashen. They looked at the dozen or so huge boxes that could kill people. Not long after, their backs were covered in fine sweat. A noble lady said, "Your Excellency, please understand. These land deeds were bought from the people." Before she finished speaking, Jiang Pingji flung the sandalwood brocade fan in her hand at her face. She actually humiliated her in public without any mercy. Bought from the people? This is the funniest joke I've heard this year. Jiang Pingji said it in a strange tone. After the noble lady heard it, she was angry, embarrassed, and resentful. She was humiliated by Jiang Pingji in public. Everyone's attention and gaze fell on her, giving her the illusion that there was a thorn in her back. If there was a crack on the ground at that moment, she couldn't wait to crawl into it and never come out. You can buy land worth 34 strings of coins for only a few hundred coins. Why haven't I come across such a cheap sale? Jiang Pingji suppressed her anger, but her eyes were already filled with murderous intent. She really wanted to kill all of them. The noble lady still wanted to quibble. A few years ago, the northern borderline stationed a large number of troops at the border. The people were ignorant and believed the rumors. They thought that the foreign tribes of the northern borderline were about to send troops to the south. To escape the flames of war, they sold their property and land at a low price. It wasn't by force. She still had some brains. She couldn't bear the crime of treason and treason. It would be better to work hard to whitewash themselves, and say that the land and houses were sold at a low price by the people themselves. Of course, such a pale and laughable excuse, not to mention others, even she herself did not believe it. The viewers in the livestream room mocked him as they gained a deeper understanding of how thick-skinned this person was. You ran Fij. I've lived for a long time. Does this person really treat others as fools? Or could it be that in her eyes the common people were all retarded? An item worth 34 strings of coins was being sold at a low price of a few hundred coins? Where's your shame? Forgotten in his mother's womb? Myeonyang. I'm in a third-tier city and the price of a house is about 9,000 per square meter. According to this woman, the people heard that the northern borderline was coming to fight, so they sold their houses for less than 300 per square meter? Even though the audience was experienced and knowledgeable, they were still shocked by the shamelessness of this aristocratic lady. Wei Kong. This person is so thick-skinned that even a Dongfeng missile can't penetrate it. For the common people in ancient times, the land was everything they had to support their families. Many people would rather die than sell their land because they knew very well that as long as the land was still in their hands, they might still have a chance of survival. As long as there was life, there was no need to worry about firewood. With the land in their hands, they could grow food. If the land was taken away, they would not be far from starving to death. Food was a hard currency in a chaotic world. The more chaotic the world was, the higher the price of food. How much food could the money from selling their ancestral land at a low price be exchanged for in the end? It's not a forced sale. Do you dare to touch your black heart and say that again? Jiang Pingji's face revealed a trace of a smile. She said, at this point the evidence is irrefutable and you still dare to quibble? Use your eyes and take a good look at the people you secretly sold to the northern borderline. Who are they? In this world, where in the world would a seller sell their ancestral land and be beaten to a lowly status by the buyer, and then smuggled and sold to the northern borderline? Is it not enough that they sold their ancestral land, but they also sold themselves and willingly became slaves? This ridiculous nonsense should be passed on to the people of the world and let them judge. Jiang Pingji opened her mouth. Everyone's expression changed again and again. Their gazes changed from the original fear to deep fear. Although Jiang Pingji had just arrived in Chongzhou not long ago, she knew a lot of inside information about Chongzhou from Gu Exin. Gu Exin traveled north and south to do business, so he was the most well-informed. He had even come into contact with the human trafficking business run by the aristocrats of Chongzhou. Jiang Pingji had concrete evidence in her hands. They could not quibble. The noblewoman was so scared that her face turned pale. She said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, I wonder where you heard about this. Jiang Pingji glanced at her and said, no matter where I heard it from, it's irrefutable evidence. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Looking at the situation, Jiang Pingji did not intend to let them go. One of the clan elders secretly glared at the noblewoman and scolded her for being stupid. He said, the matter of the people's land and residences can be put aside for now and discussed in the future. However, the matter of colluding with the enemy and selling the country must be thoroughly investigated no matter what. The most important thing now was not to clear their names and forcefully buy and sell the land. Once the matter of colluding with the enemy and selling the country was determined, it would definitely bring disaster to the entire clan. A light punishment would be confiscation of the family property. A heavy punishment would be the extermination of the entire clan. Jiang Pingji said, "This is all the evidence. What do you want to deny? If it's not colluding with the enemy and selling the country, how do you explain the fact that you took away the people's land and residences, banished them from good families and sold them in batches to the northern borderline? Do you know what kind of life they lead in the northern borderline? Even animals live better than them. How do you explain these letters written by your clan leader himself?" Jiang Pingji opened a superstitious letter. The contents of the letter made the clan elder break out in a cold sweat. The current situation was very disadvantageous to them. Jiang Pingji was still aggressive. In their panic, they did not have the energy to carefully analyze the handwriting in the letter. Anyway, at first glance, it was indeed the handwriting they were familiar with. Even the signature was familiar. Could it be that the matter was true? Did the clan leader really collude with the people of the northern borderline behind the clan elder's back? But they occupied the land and residences only for the sake of wealth. They had no intention of betraying the country. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, if yellow mud fell into one's pants, it was still shit. They did not have the confidence to deny it. Chapter 894. Keep an eye on all of them. I'll investigate further. Jiang Pingji said to Fu Wang. Before that, don't allow any of them to enter or leave the house or receive guests. Don't allow any servants to leave the city gate. If anyone is found to have violated the rules, kill them on the spot. Fu Wang said, I understand. Jiang Pingji ordered people to keep the boxes and keep an eye on them day and night to prevent any mistakes. Lu Shi said, Lanting, you're being too extreme. I'm worried that the aristocratic families in Chengzhou will act recklessly and start a mutiny. The aristocratic families that were killed were the bigger ones in Chengzhou. There were other small aristocratic families that were not involved. If Jiang Pingji made a big move, the small gentry clans would act upon hearing the news and think that they were threatened. Who knew what they would do? Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, Father's worries are not unreasonable. That's why I didn't exterminate all of them. I'm just keeping them locked up. When they think it through and spit out what doesn't belong to them, I'll set them free. The aristocratic families in Chengzhou will have time to settle the score in the future. They can escape today, but they can't escape tomorrow. Lu Shi nodded and said, It's good that you think that way. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Only by judging the situation can one last. If Jiang Pingji's style of doing things was as fast as lightning, Lu Shi's style was silent. It was hard to say which was better. The former was fast and had many hidden dangers. The latter was slow, but it could reduce many twists and turns. Jiang Pingji seemed to have thought of something and reminded Lu Shi. Father, third brother seems to like extravagant things. Lu Shi's face darkened. He said shamefully, maybe he didn't take good care of himself when he was young. He became like this. It was as if he had never seen a big scene before. He was startled by everything and wished he could hang all the good stuff on him. Lu Zhao's sword was inlaid with gold and silver and decorated with gems. He looked like a nouveau riche. Lu Shi tried to correct him a few times, but Lu Zhao refused to change. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, Third brother is still young. There's plenty of time to train him. I mentioned him because I wanted to tell father to stay in the mansion for the next few days and not run around so as to avoid being targeted by those villains who are desperate to take risks. Her actions had offended all the aristocratic families in Chengzhou. They had no way of retaliating against her. They couldn't touch Lu Shi, but it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't target Lu Zhao. I will be careful. Lu Shi nodded and added, You be careful too. After leaving the main hall, Jiang Pingji heaved a sigh of relief. She was about to look for Feng Zhen and the others to discuss what to do next when she caught a glimpse of a head popping out from the corner of her eye. Zhao, she called. Lu Zhao had changed into a new set of clothes. His style was just as noble and gorgeous, and he looked like a rich young man who had walked out of a painting. Sister. Having been caught red-handed by Jiang Pingji, Lu Zhao was feeling guilty. When he heard how Jiang Pingji addressed him, his eyes lit up again. What are you doing there? Of course I'm waiting for sister. There are some things that I'm not very clear about. Jiang Pingji asked, What is it? Lu Zhao hemmed and hawed for a while, his face almost turning red. Did they really do such a disgraceful thing? Lu Zhao's eyes drifted and he asked very softly. Although he was the son of a concubine, he was from the Lu family of Hejian. His body was branded with the mark of the aristocratic families. Lu Zhao was proud of his family background. He had never thought that the aristocratic families were so glamorous on the surface, but they had done such dirty deeds behind the scenes. Of course it's true. Zhao, you're not young anymore. Look for me in the future and let me bring you to see the outside world. If you really can't, look for the housekeeper and let him tell you what the real world is like. You're always in the backyard. What kind of knowledge can you have? Lu Zhao's cheeks turned red. His eyes were filled with shame. Jiang Pingji continued, the scandals that the aristocratic families in Chongzhou have done are far more than what I've revealed. Explain the facts one by one. Jiang Pingji added that they had colluded with the enemy and sold their country, but what was the difference between what they had done and colluded with the enemy and sold their country? Jiang Pingji's words could not be considered as wronging them. Lu Zhao laughed bitterly. He stammered, Sister, is our family like this too? If that was the case, Lu Zhao really could not enjoy everything with a clear conscience. Jiang Pingji said, your family has a big business. Why would they need to do such immoral things? Only those who are greedy and have shallow knowledge will use all their energy to exploit and amass wealth. The people are like water. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it. Such a simple principle, yet no one understands it. Lu Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. He thought of the scene he had just seen. His heart was filled with indignation and anger. Sister, you've only locked them up. Is there a next step? From what I see, their crimes can be exterminated. Although Lu Zhao was born bashful, his bones were tough. He even had a hint of abhorrence for evil. Jiang Pingji said, there's no rush. We have to prioritize when we do things. If we want to settle accounts with them, we can do so at any time. Lu Zhao heard another meaning. Sister, was she planning to deal with them gently? She smiled and said, the most important thing now is to take back the land in their hands, resettle the people of Chongzhou and let them live in peace. One person's energy is limited. I can only take care of the people first. When the situation is completely stabilized, I will have the energy to deal with these vermin. If we only care about competing with them, the longer it drags on, the more the people will suffer. For Jiang Pingji, she could deal with the aristocratic families of Chongzhou at any time, but she could not let the suffering people continue to suffer. Lu Zhao was silent for a while. He did not expect Jiang Pingji to give such a reason. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. What happened in the prefecture government quickly spread throughout Chongzhou. Just as Lu Xi predicted, the small gentry families were trembling with fear and unease. However, Jiang Pingji caused such a huge commotion. In the end, she only locked them up and did not take any further actions. This action made people scratching their heads in confusion. At this critical juncture where everyone was in danger, the Cui family welcomed a special guest. I am a servant of the Lu Prefecture Magistrate. I have been ordered to send the young Lang Jun back to his ancestral home. Feng Zhen was dressed in a neat and tidy scholarly robe. He wore a headpiece and restrained his frivolous expression. When he was serious, he looked rather noble. When the leader of the Cui family heard Feng Zhen's invitation, he hurriedly went out to welcome him. Jiang Pingji had told him early on that his wife had given birth to a son for him during the earthquake. The son did not die and was brought to Wanzhou's Xiangyang district by 2 loyal servants to be raised for 2 years. Ever since he received the news, he had been looking forward to it day and night. He was already burning with anxiety. He and Feng Zhen greeted each other and looked anxiously at the horse carriage behind Feng Zhen. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing a small head. Chapter 895. Feng Zhen nodded with a smile and turned to reach out to the child. Come to uncle. Feng Zhen had a good relationship with the child. As soon as he said this, the child quickly smiled and reached out to him. Uncle Feng, he called out in a crisp voice. The voice fell to the ears of the Cui clan leader. It was like the sound of nature, but he could only watch as his son threw himself into Feng Zhen's arms. I apologize to master for not being able to protect madam. Before the Cui clan leader could restrain his sour heart, 2 kind-looking servants came down from the carriage behind and knelt in front of him. He knew these 2. One was the housekeeper of the wife's dowry, the other was a servant girl who was later chosen to be the child's wet nurse. How can mortals predict natural and man-made disasters? It was not easy to survive the earthquake in Shangjing. Sanyang is ultimately not blessed. Looking at the 2's plain clothes and slightly weathered faces, then thinking of the child's tender face and fine cotton clothes, The Cui clan leader couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. He said, "Thanks to the two of you protecting your master loyally, there is a day I can reunite with my own son." Feng Zhen saw the Cui clan leader personally help the two loyal servants up and had a better impression of him. Thinking of this, he teased the child in his arms and said, "That's your daddy." The child's eyeballs spun around and then he chuckled as he called out, "Daddy," causing the Cui clan's patriarch's heart to soften. It wasn't that the Cui clan didn't suspect the child's bloodline, but when the older generation saw the child's face, their doubts disappeared. It turned out that this child was extremely well-born and actually looked 60% like his father when he was young. The Cui clan leader's mother looked at him and couldn't help calling him her darling. The child and the two loyal servants were led to the backyard. Feng Zhen then stopped smiling and looked at the Cui clan leader meaningfully. Seeing this, the Cui clan leader quietly invited Feng Zhen to the main hall. "Manager Feng, please." The Cui clan had lived in Chongzhou for a long time and relied on doing business between the northern borderline and Dongqing to prosper. They earned money from both sides and still managed to survive until now. It seemed that this young Cui clan leader was really the reincarnation of a vixen. Not only was he perceptive, he was also smart. Feng Zhen thought that he would have to drop a few hints before the other party would understand. From the looks of it now, he didn't need to spend much effort at all. Feng Zhen gracefully took his seat. "Has Master Cui heard of the major events that have happened in the past few days?" Since the head of the Cui clan was so agreeable, Feng Zhen did not beat around the bush. Cui family head dismissed his attendants and muttered, "I've heard a little about it." How could he have only heard of it? His ears were about to go deaf from the bombardment. After spending so much time with his lord, Feng Zhen started to like to play straight. "Since you've heard of it, what do you think about it, family head Cui?" Family head Cui hesitated for a moment. After a while he said, "I do have some humble opinions, but I'm afraid that saying it will offend the prefecture overseer. Now that there's no one here in private, you can say whatever you want to say. My master has always been generous and benevolent, and is open to good advice." Master Cui sighed. More than a decade ago, the northern borderline foreign tribes took advantage of the political turmoil in Dongqing to launch a surprise attack on Chongzhou's Shangyu County. They captured and killed countless people. Although Master Yuanjing took back 3 cities, there are still 3 cities in the hands of the northern borderline that have yet to be returned. After the northern borderline grew stronger, they sent a large number of troops to the border to demonstrate their might, causing the people of Chongzhou to panic. Someone took the opportunity to spread rumors and took advantage of the situation, causing the people to become destitute and homeless. As for who it was, I'm sure Prefecture Overseer Feng knows. Developing to the situation today was not the work of a day and a night. Although the situation has improved after Prefecture Overseer Lu took office, it is still not a permanent solution. Feng Zhen listened seriously, not showing any displeasure or anger on his face. This gave family head Cui some courage. He said tactfully, "The aristocratic families of Chongzhou have already become a force to be reckoned with. It's understandable that Prefecture Overseer Lu wants to take things slowly. Moreover, in the past few years there have been some benefits. It's just that the tumor can only be removed with strong medicine now. Prefecture Overseer Lu has put in a lot of effort, but the power in Chongzhou has already become a foregone conclusion. If we don't use external forces to forcefully break it, I'm afraid it will be difficult to cure." Although Lu Shi did not really like the Cui family, who were fence-sitters, family head Cui had a good impression of Lu Shi. Without Lu Shi's meticulous governance and multifaceted dealings, the situation in Chongzhou would only be worse. It could even give rise to the Tsingyi army or the Red Lotus group, which were evil sects among the people. It was a pity that Lu Shi was an external force and he liked to take things slowly. He had been lying low, trying to take back all the power from the aristocratic families, but the effect was too slow. Interestingly, Lu Shi, who liked to take things slowly, had a hot-tempered daughter. The moment she came, she gave the aristocratic families of Chongzhou a slap. He then thought about how Jiang Pingji had contacted him in advance. Family head Cui keenly sensed something. He felt that if he grasped this opportunity, he might be able to push his family up a notch. With such a thought, he was so excited to see Feng Zhen. His son was important, but the future of his family was more important. After the conversation, he felt that his guess was correct. Jiang Pingji had the intention to suppress the other aristocratic families in Chongzhou, but she had no intention of completely offending them. She definitely had to support the trusted forces that were close to her. Otherwise, she would not be able to pacify the aristocratic families in Chongzhou. Just as he was thinking, family head Cui heard Fengzhen say, "Because of this world needs people like my lord who are wholeheartedly for the people and are not afraid of power to stand up. What happened a few days ago was just an appetizer. Family head Cui, what kind of person do you think my lord is? Young and talented, with courage and insight that surpasses others. He is not inferior to his father." He did not say any unnecessary compliments to prevent himself from appearing too flattering. My lord has the intention to reorganize Chongzhou, but he has met with too much resistance. There are always people who think highly of themselves or are extremely stupid who try to stop him. That is indeed the case, family head Cui continued. I have also thought of helping the people, but I am powerless to change the situation. Not to mention that I am weak, I have to take care of the old and young at home, so I am unable to do my best. Now that there is a person like Magistrate Lu, there is hope for the people of Chongzhou. Fengzhen said with admiration, family head Cui is also a man of character. It is not easy to have such a heart. I am ashamed. In the end I still did not help much. Fengzhen changed the topic. He said, if I really think that family head Cui is a smart person and should understand how to act according to the general trend, I will not say much. My lord and your son are also fated for a period of time. In terms of relationship, I am naturally closer to you. Hearing that, the smile on family head Cui's face grew brighter. He had also heard that his wife had been buried under the rubble to protect their child. It was only thanks to Jiang Pingji's full help that the child's life was saved. Jiang Pingji was the savior of the Cui family and even more so the savior of his eldest son. If the Cui family wanted to use this excuse to repay Jiang Pingji's kindness and return the favor, no one could blame them. Chapter 896. Master Cui was so understanding that Fengzhen completed Jiang Pingji's task without much effort. He reported back to Jiang Pingji and told her the details of his meeting and conversation with the Cui family's master. Jiang Pingji thought about it and asked Fengzhen, do you think this person is trustworthy? She had the intention to support the aristocratic families in her camp, but that was just a piece of candy. If the Cuis knew when to stop, she did not mind letting the Cuis reap the benefits and become a rising power in Chongzhou. If they were greedy and wanted to take both sides, she would not tolerate the Cuis. My lord, do you really think this person is trustworthy? Fengzhen thought about it and said seriously, the Cuis started out as merchants. Because of their roots, they are not well received in Chongzhou. They are even lower than others in all aspects. My lord, you forcefully suppressed the aristocratic families in Chongzhou. For the Cuis, if the orthodox aristocratic families are suppressed, they will have a good opportunity to stand out. If my lord can support them, the Cuis will soar to the sky. Only when the aristocratic families in Chongzhou were suppressed could the second-class aristocratic families or commoner families have a chance to rise up. Under such circumstances, the Cuis could not continue to treat them like merchants. After all, they had seen Jiang Pingji's decisiveness and ruthlessness. Was it so easy to have a foot in two boats? If they were not careful, the boat would be destroyed and the people would die. The Cuis were rooted in Chongzhou. They did not dare to take the risk. Jiang Pingji tapped her fingers on the table. After thinking for a while, she finally agreed. You said that Cui Zhonghuan wanted me to give his little bean a name? Cui Zhonghuan was referring to Master Cui. His surname was Cui and his first name was Yu. His courtesy name was Zhonghuan. Regardless of whether it was Yu or Huan, they both had the meaning of light. It was a good meaning. Fengzhen smiled. Yes, but in my opinion, my lord should give him a nickname or a courtesy name that will be useful in the future. As for a proper name, it was better for Master Cui to come up with it himself. Fengzhen had yet to experience Jiang Pingji's naming skills. He felt that his lord was well-read and had no problem with her literary talent. Reality proved that, give me a courtesy name or a nickname. It's better to give me a courtesy name. It makes me sound more solemn. How about Bai? Fengzhen's mouth twitched. Qiguan Rang, who was handling documents, was even more direct. He accidentally pushed down a pile of bamboo slips. Master, are you serious? If I remember correctly, isn't that the name of the Han Mei family's horse? When he heard the name of the horse, Fengzhen almost burst out laughing. Who came up with such a stupid name? Jiang Pingji smiled, her eyes shining with a teasing light. She said, Of course it's to scare you. You might as well call it Fusho. I prepared this name for Huayu's family's second treasure, but looking at how he and Jingxian rarely spend time together, I think there won't be any good news from Huayu in the next few years. I'll give him another name in the future. With such a simple-minded name like Bye-Bye, Fengzhen didn't mind whether Fusho sounded good or not. After all, it had a good meaning. Perhaps this is the so-called vulgar is elegant? The name Fusho can also be used. To this day, Fengzhen still did not understand a principle. Being well-read did not equate to having outstanding literary talent. His lord was actually illiterate. Compared to Fengzhen, who was kept in the dark, Qiguan Rang knew the truth. He said, "It makes me feel that this longevity and Huayu's daughter, Chongqing, have a similar meaning." Both had a good meaning, but in reality, it was unbearably vulgar. Fengzhen was puzzled. He signaled Qiguan Rang with his eyes, asking him to explain. Qiguan Rang said, "Simply put, if you don't want your child to bear an indescribable name, don't look for the Lord." Although it was an honor to be given a name by the Lord, it could not be done to the child, right? For example, Qiguan Rang did not look for Jiang Pingji when he wanted to name his daughter. Instead, he privately flipped through many ancient books. Who knew if the Lord would come up with names like Xianxia, Ringyun, or Shunfeng? He only had one precious daughter. Qiguan Rang could not bear to harm his daughter. Fengzhen's expression. It was really hard to explain. The next day, the head of the Cui family, Cui Yu, personally visited. Not only did he bring his eldest son, but he also brought a big gift for Jiang Pingji. The Cui family's Pledge of Allegiance. Looking at the Pledge of Allegiance, Jiang Pingji had a better understanding of the current head of the Cui family, Cui Yu. He was a politician who had been delayed by business. Not only did he have a keen sense of smell and far-sighted vision, but he also had unimaginable courage and decisiveness. It was a pity that this kind of opportunistic businessman could only share blessings, not trials and tribulations, let alone a heart-to-heart. Once Jiang Pingji lost power or was unable to bring more benefits to the Cui family, the Cui family would most likely look for a more suitable partner. After jumping ship, they would kick her out. The reason the Cui family was willing to accept the olive branch from Jiang Pingji was mostly because she had slaughtered a group of Chongzhou aristocrats. If she had not done that, the Cui family would still thank her for saving their lives, but they would never bet on her. Head of the Cui family, what do you mean by this? Jiang Pingji pretended to be puzzled. She looked at the land deeds and slave sale contracts that Cui Yu had presented. Her lips curled into a mysterious smile. Cui Yu said, "Now that the world is in chaos, the people have no way to make a living. At the critical moment of the country's crisis, those greedy vermin unexpectedly took the opportunity to exploit the people. They are the vermin of the country. I am alone and can't stop them. I can only do what I can to comfort them. I heard that the officials' benevolent and righteous move is to station fields at the border and train the army to defend against the northern borderline. It is really a blessing for the people of Chongzhou. I do not have a lot of assets, but I started my business with the people. How can I forget my roots? I only hope that the official will save the people from the disaster." The smile on Jiang Pingji's face grew wider. Everyone liked to hear compliments, and she was no exception. She had to admit that Cui Yu's business boasting was very pleasant to her ears. Jiang Pingji then picked up the account book and carefully looked at the things listed on it. The Cui family left behind the clan's sacrificial field and even rented a portion of the fertile land that they bought at a fair price to her for free. Of course, the proportion of these fields was not large. The largest proportion was the fertile land that they bought from the people. However, compared to the previous aristocrats, the Cui family still had some conscience. Although they lowered the price, they only lowered it by 30%. It was better than those ruthless people who lowered the price by 30 or 40 times. Now, in order to gain Jiang Pingji's trust and be put in an important position, the Cui family gifted this portion of the land to Jiang Pingji. Apart from the fertile land, there was also a lot of uncultivated land. Most of these places did not have anything good, but they were vast and suitable as bases for the troops. Apart from that, there were many contracts that sold themselves. She roughly looked at them and realized that these contracts were all for the people of Chongzhou. Jiang Pingji raised her eyelids and looked at Cui Yu. She questioned him silently with an imposing manner. Cui Yu was stunned for a moment and immediately said, "Official, these contracts are for the people of Chongzhou who were sold to the northern borderline." The Cui family's words are light and do not dare to provoke them. They can only secretly use their connections to secretly buy back a batch and send them to other places to be settled. After he said that, a smile appeared on Jiang Pingji's face again. Chapter 897. Cui, you could not have asked for more. Only those of the same generation or elders who had a good relationship with him could call him by his courtesy name. Jiang Pingji's question was a hint of intimacy. If it had been another woman, Cui you might have misunderstood, but since it was Jiang Pingji he dared not. There was no other reason. He did not realize that the other party was a woman and even subconsciously ignored her. When he faced Jiang Pingji he always had the illusion that he was facing the emperor. The prestige of the Tian family, perhaps it's nothing more than this. Before he realized it, the back of his shirt was already soaked with sweat. A straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Since all of you think so highly of me, I naturally can't be stingy. Jiang Pingji accepted Mrs. Cui's pledge of allegiance without any psychological pressure. Next, it was time to let Mrs. Cui see her determination. Have you heard of the bamboo paper in Hejian County? Cui Yu's heart suddenly trembled. He was so shocked that his eyes went round and his tongue went numb. He almost forgot how to speak. Hejian bamboo paper? How could he not have heard of it? The Cui clan made their fortune through business. Although they already had some reputation and heritage, they were still merchants in the end and were not taken seriously by others. The more it was like this, the more the Cui clan wanted to ascend to a higher level. Things like bamboo paper could only be touched by noble families. It wasn't that the Cui family didn't have the money to buy it, but they didn't even have the qualification to order it. He was anxious and a bold idea circled in his mind. Could it be that Lu Shi was going to give up the profits from the bamboo paper? Even if it was just a piece of the cake, it was enough for Cui's to digest. However, this thought did not exist for long before Cui Yu forcefully suppressed it. Based on the intuition of a merchant, the woman in front of him could not be underestimated, nor could she be judged by the secular standards. For some people, the more you wanted something from them, the more they wouldn't give it to you. On the contrary, there might be a windfall. Cui Yu said, the Hejian bamboo paper is a treasure sought after by all the famous people in the world. I have naturally heard of it. Jiang Pingji said, my mother has been intelligent and quick-witted since she was young. The bamboo paper was created based on Kai Ho's paper. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of the materials, they were unable to mass-produce them. His mother often said that bamboo paper wasn't something that only one family had. It's just that she's afraid that someone will use it to create trouble, so she's been hiding the craftsmanship of bamboo paper. It's not that she's selfish and doesn't want to teach it to others. Cui Yu had no way of verifying whether Gu Min had said those things, so he just let Gu Min say whatever she wanted. Cui Yu's heart skipped a beat, almost skipping a beat. He nervously swallowed his saliva. It was clear that he was already cheering in his heart, but on the surface he had to maintain his composure. The implication of Jiang Pingji's words was very clear. She was satisfied with Cui's performance this time, so she allowed Cui to have a share of the big cake of bamboo paper. Jiang Pingji continued, this is my mother's unfulfilled wish. As her daughter, I naturally have to inherit it. However, just like what his mother had been worried about, the biggest problem in mass production of bamboo paper was the raw materials. If we don't have enough raw materials, mass production will be useless. Hearing this, Cui Yu's heart sank to the bottom again. Great joy was followed by great sorrow. It was too exciting. Without waiting for Cui Yu to speak, Jiang Pingji sighed. In order to fulfill my mother's dying wish, I personally went to investigate and experiment. I really found something that could perfectly replace the bamboo paper. He had started experimenting a few years ago and the paper-making technology had already matured. As long as there are no problems with the raw materials, mass production will no longer be difficult. I don't say that everyone in the world can afford to use paper, but at least middle-class families won't have to continue using heavy bamboo slips. If Cui Yu's mood could be drawn into a picture, it would probably be like a roller coaster. The ups and downs could cause a heart attack. Jiang Pingji asked someone to bring a stack of cut rice paper. Cui Yu's eyes were glued to it. He had been modest before, but Cui's were rich. If they spent a high price and used their connections, they could always buy some from irregular channels. As the head of the Cuis, he had naturally used bamboo paper before. Just by looking at it, he knew that the improved bamboo paper that Jiang Pingji mentioned was not inferior to the quality of the top bamboo paper. If he could really get a share, would the Chuis just take a step forward? It was obviously a big step that would burst his crotch. Maybe Zhonghuan doesn't know, but I want to rebuild the Jinling Pavilion. Although I dare not compare with the Jinling Pavilion of the previous dynasty, it's not much worse. I plan to use this paper to bind all the books in the Jinling Pavilion. At that time I will need a huge amount of paper. I dare not easily entrust this matter to someone who is not my confidant. Jiang Pingji said, I wonder if Zhonghuan is willing to lend me a hand? She said so much, but the last sentence was far more attractive to Cui Yu. He could not wait to nod his head and immediately answer loudly, yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times, 100 times he was willing. However, he had to be reserved. Thus Cui Yu forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart and said reservedly, it's my wish, but I dare not ask. Jiang Pingji's face was full of smiles. The livestream audience was stunned. Wutong King, what's this? Please translate. Lu Qing Yimo, it's just that I dare not ask for it. This is my wish. Shunfeng Express, I only care about one thing. The streamer won't hand over the paper-making technique so easily, will she? Jiang Pingji accidentally saw the bullet screen and could not help but laugh in her heart. Why would she do such a stupid thing? She clearly knew that Cui was a businessman. Why would she reveal her trump card at such a time? She agreed to let Chuis participate in the paper-making process, but she did not say that she would hand over the core technique. She would only use their manpower. When the rice paper was mass-produced and the paper's price came down from the altar, she would not mind handing over the technique to Chuis. No. The rice paper was the carrot that she had hooked. It was specially used to lure Chuis, the greedy donkey, so that it would stare at the carrot to quench its thirst. Even so, Jiang Pingji's conditions were far beyond Chui's expectations. They were deeply grateful. Sometimes when you give too much, people may not remember your good deeds. Only when you give them little by little, will they know how precious the things they have in their hands are. Half a month passed like that. The city was still under martial law. The heavily guarded soldiers did not retreat. The few families that were under house arrest could not even hold a funeral. Many of the young gentry felt their buttocks burning. They could not sit still anymore. At this moment, two pieces of news bombarded the circle of friends of the gentry in Chongzhou. To be precise, the second piece of news was too important. In comparison, the first piece of news was insignificant. The first piece of news was that the Chuis of Chongzhou, whom they had previously looked down on, had boarded Lu Shi's ship. They had completely chosen to stand on her side. They did not care whether the Chuis stood on their side or not. In many people's eyes, they were just toads that were vainly trying to become one of the top aristocratic families in Chongzhou. The second piece of news was that the Chuis, who had chosen to stand on their side, handed over a proof of allegiance and obtained the right to sell the bamboo paper and rice paper from Lu Shi. What was even more shocking was that after 5 years of cooperation between the two parties, the Chuis could still obtain the production technique of the two types of paper from Jiang Pingji. Knowing the contents of the proof of allegiance that the Chuis handed over, the gentry clans beat their chests and stamped their feet. It's better to be straight than to do things. Your lord isn't the kind of stubborn person who won't turn back until she hits a brick wall. If being flexible can reduce trouble, I won't disdain to do it. Qiguan Rang smiled but said nothing. He had known Jiang Pingji for more than 6 years. It could even be said that he had watched her grow up. How could he not know the changes in her? Jiang Pingji was not anxious at all. She sat on the fishing platform calmly and smiled as she watched the group of fishes fighting for their own interests. The aristocratic families that she had placed under house arrest earlier were also dumbfounded. In their script, Jiang Pingji should be boycotted by the aristocratic families of Chongzhou. They should exert pressure on her and force her to submit. When Jiang Pingji could not take it anymore, she would release them from house arrest. They could then take the opportunity to guide public opinion and clear their names once and for all. Who could tell them what was going on? Why was reality so different from the script they had read? A loud bang broke the sorrowful atmosphere. The people who were sobbing softly were so frightened that they did not dare to make a sound. The gloomy and heavy mourning hall was hung with white banners and white silk. A coffin made of gold-threaded nanmu was placed in the middle. Because the entire clan was placed under house arrest on the clan land, not only could they not hold a grand funeral, they could not even bury the coffin. After some inquiries, They found out that the aristocratic families of Chongzhou were wavering in their stance. The hot-tempered clan elder exploded on the spot and threw his cup in anger. Son of the Lu family. You've gone too far. The white-haired clan elder was so angry that he was about to have a heart attack. The muscles on his face twitched strangely. Clan elder, what should we do now? Lu Shi obviously doesn't want to let us off easily. Are we supposed to keep him under house arrest and prevent the old master from being able to rest in peace? It has been dragged on for more than 20 days. If it continues to drag on, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the deceased husband's resentment to dissipate. The widow wore mourning clothes and mourning clothes. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her delicate and pitiful demeanor added to her charm. The clan elder said fiercely, even if the resentment is difficult to dissipate, it's still seeking revenge on Lu Shi. Why are you panicking? Women just don't have any experience. Shut your mouth. Lu Shi knows that if he wants to snatch it by force, once he gives in, the consequences will be unimaginable. Can you bear such a huge responsibility? The woman had never had her own views. Her husband favored his concubine and neglected his wife. She did not dare to fight for anything for herself. Now that her husband had passed away and she had no children, she was even more helpless. As the wife of the royal family, she was scolded and insulted by the clan elder in public. In a daze, she looked at the coffin in the hall and cried even more miserably. She was not crying for losing her husband. She was crying for her dark and unknown future. She had no children, her husband was dead, and the direct line of descent was lost. She was no longer the wife of the royal family. Similar scenes played out in the various clans. One by one they scolded Jiang Pingji. They held onto the land in their hands and refused to let go. Jiang Pingji did not care much. With the Chui's pledge of allegiance, she received many more pledges of allegiance over the next few days. The land that she obtained was not considered fertile, but it was more than enough to train the troops, build a military camp and set up a papermaking workshop. As for farming, she brought her people to investigate the field. She studied the situation at the borders and the geography of various places. She chose 4 key districts for farming. Because a few of the aristocratic families in Chongzhou were placed under house arrest, many places had vacancies. After Jiang Pingji picked and chose, she either threw the positions to the small aristocratic families that sought refuge with her and let them have a taste of the sweetness. Or she placed the people she had groomed in the positions and let them practice. After a round of beating and bestowing favors, the atmosphere in Chongzhou changed. Anyone who thought that they had 9 lives could come and see if she would kill them or not. Without this as a backing, who would give in to her? Jiang Pingji ruthlessly reorganized the forces in Chongzhou. She pulled in one group and beat another. Then she cultivated her own forces. She was having a lot of fun. Based on this situation, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou will suffer a great loss. Wei Xi received the news and was not surprised. Thinking about Hu County in his previous life, she was even more ruthless. She surrounded them at night and massacred the aristocratic families. It was a huge case that shocked the court. At that time, the prestige of the court was at rock bottom. The officials and the military pushed the blame to each other. Instead, she took advantage of the situation. She caused such a huge commotion. There were countless people who condemned her, but nothing happened in the end. In comparison, Chongzhou only lost a few leading aristocratic families. That was a blessing to their ancestors. Chapter 899. Wei Xi could not help but laugh. How could it not be refreshing to cut through the Gordian knot? This was his lord's usual style. He accidentally learned of the courtesy name Jiang Pingji had given to Cui Yu's eldest son. He was silent for a while. Fushou. This is a good name with a profound meaning. Wei Xi only said this and his emotions were in turmoil for a long time. However, the knot in his heart had been mostly resolved. He felt uncomfortable for a while before letting it go. Mr. Wei, my lord specially asked me to deliver a letter to you. It is now in your room. Wei Xi was surprised. He put down the bamboo slip in his hand and looked up at the messenger. His lord had a secret letter for him. It must be an important matter. How could she leave it in his room? Servants usually came in and out to clean. If he accidentally lost the secret letter and delayed his lord's important matter, what should he do? Wei Xi hurriedly put down his work and walked quickly to his room. There was indeed a letter on the coffee table. With a serious face, he removed the seal and picked up the letter inside. He opened it and read it. Wei Ci froze on the spot as if his acupuncture points had bei hit. Even his expression became unnatural. His ears were bloodshot. There were no important secrets written in it, but for Wei Ci, it was far more important than secrets. There were only 5 words written on the huge letter. The handwriting was strange. Each word looked round, but Wei Ci was very familiar with it. Whenever that person was in a very good mood, she liked to use this special style of writing. Zishao, I miss you. Miss Wei Ci recovered from the shock and hurriedly got up from the table. He almost pressed down on his sleeves and staggered. He looked around guiltily. After making sure that there was no one, he folded the letter and stuffed it into the envelope. He secretly hid it in a brocade box. There was nothing special in the box. It was all Wei Ci's personal belongings that he brought with him wherever he went. For example, an old embroidered sachet, a painting he drew when he had nothing better to do, a brightly preserved rabbit fur cloak. Now there was another letter. He had originally wanted to place the letter on the top of the box, but when he thought of his bad friend by his side, he was afraid that there would be another scene of Fengzhen sleeping with him, so he stuffed the letter into the inner layer of his foldable cloak. It was like he was destroying a corpse and then returning everything to its original position. Because of this letter, Wei Ci's state of mind was in a mess. He could not even sleep peacefully. That night he had a very strange dream. When he woke up, he could still see the other person's lips moving in front of him. You can name the characters in the future. This was no longer a question of a name. It was a question of whether or not it was horrifying. Wei Siji asked himself, dreams are born from the heart. Could it be that I also have such rebellious thoughts subconsciously? He never had an answer to this question. My lord is in a good mood today. Could it be that those stubborn people are finally willing to give in? Fengzhen lifted his sleeves to hide his yawn. His eyes were almost squinted into slits and the word sleepy was written all over his face. Jiang Pingji smiled. I had a good dream yesterday. So it was just a beautiful dream, causing him to be happy for nothing. Fengzhen pretended to pound his shoulders exaggeratedly and complained, if they still refuse to admit defeat, even if it's icy weather, the corpses that have been left there for more than a month will probably decompose by now. Why bother? They've already lost the best opportunity to resist, and now they're just struggling on the verge of death. A centipede dies, but it doesn't fall down. We can't let our guard down. We still have to be on guard. Jiang Pingji knew what the aristocrats were capable of. As long as she didn't completely beat them into submission or cripple them, as long as they bore a grudge, they would one day secretly bite back at her. If they knew what was good for them, Jiang Pingji could still let them struggle at death's door for a while. If they didn't, she could only use extreme measures to get rid of them all. She wanted to stabilize her power in the north, and someone had to be sacrificed. I know the severity of the matter. My lord, you can rest assured. This winter was destined to be turbulent for Dongqing. Jiang Pingji ruled Chongzhou and Hu County, and Lu Shi retreated behind the scenes. The heroes of the world responded in silence. They could see clearly that Jiang Pingji was now fully deserving of her position as the overlord of the north. If she could gain a firm foothold before the next spring and absorb as much of the connections and power that Lu Shi had left behind, no one in Dongqing would be able to compete with her. The fake Emperor Prince Chongshou couldn't, the Su family from Zhou County couldn't, the Meng family from Cangzhou couldn't, and the imperial court that was struggling at death's door in Qinzhou couldn't either. Just the thought of her current territory made Dongqing's feudal lords breathless. She issued a recruitment order, built the Golden Scale Pavilion, gave books to the world's famous scholars, and was willing to write books for the world's scholars. No matter which one of these 4 matters were thrown out, it would cause all the forces to be in an uproar. Let's talk about the recruitment notice first. It wasn't something that just anyone could make. The first person was a sage 700 years ago. He sought talents for reform, swept away the chaos in the world, and stabilized the world. The second was the founder of the Xia dynasty. Under the advice of Prime Minister Huangfu, he built a platform to recruit talents. This was also one of the reasons why he could stand out in the chaos of the 16 kingdoms and unify China. If not for the recruitment order, the chaos of the 16 kingdoms could have continued for more than 100 years. Now, it was the turn of the daughter of the Lu family to follow the example of the sage. It was terrifying to think about it. Moreover, the construction of the Golden Scale Pavilion allowed the commoners to borrow books for free. This touched the nerves of many aristocrats and caused them to condemn them. However, even if they thought that the commoners were not qualified to read the books of the sages, they could not say it out loud. Therefore they used the former Prime Minister Huang Fuxiu as a breakthrough point. He had been dead for hundreds of years. Because of Jiang Pingji he was dragged out, verbally whipped and killed by many aristocrats. Everyone said that Prime Minister Huang Fu was a star of calamity. The chaos of the 16 kingdoms for more than 200 years was also caused by him. They cursed him for threatening the young lord, mobilizing troops without authorization, and even said that he established his own government and had the intention to rebel. If Xia Gaozong had not endured hardship and endured humiliation, how could he have killed the traitor? Looking through the history books, traitors ended up being dismembered and cooked. Lu Shi, who dared to imitate him in building the Golden Scale Pavilion, naturally would not have a good ending. After a round of scolding, those who did not know would think that Jiang Pingji dug up their ancestral graves. In conclusion, Jiang Pingji definitely had the intention to rebel. If she did not get rid of it now, she would definitely harm the people in the future. It would be too late by then. It was an impassioned declaration. It was a pity that there was only one group of people scolding. How could the people of the world not know why they were so enthusiastic in their scolding? As for gifting books to the world's famous scholars and being willing to write books for the people of the world in the eyes of others, these two were no different from hype. Only a fool would believe it. Not long after, many people were slapped in the face. The world's famous teacher Yuan Jing personally went to Wanzhou. He and Qing Qing discussed the beginners' teaching materials. The leader of the Feng family in Shangyang, Feng Ren, gave tens of thousands of books to the unbuilt Golden Scale Pavilion. He also joined the development team of beginners' teaching materials. Of these two people, one was the model of a famous scholar, and the other was the model of the aristocrats. They were both big shots. In ancient times, when information was backward, the effect of celebrities was unusually powerful. With Feng Ren and Yuan Jing, two living advertisements, would their die-hard fans not buy it? Chapter 900. The late emperor passed away and the young emperor succeeded the throne. Dongqing valued filial piety. Naturally, they would not change the year right after they succeeded the throne. Therefore, the matter of changing the year name had been delayed from the beginning of the year to the first day of the new year. Therefore, the new year was also known as the first year of Qingzong. If it was a peaceful era, such a big event like changing the year would be a cause for celebration. However, it was different now. Dongqing was divided, the feudal lords were divided, and the reputation of the court was at rock bottom. To put it bluntly, the young emperor's edict could only be effective in the vicinity of Qinzhou. It was just a roll of yellow cloth anywhere else. As the lord, Jiang Pingji should receive the New Year's greetings from the officials in the state capital. However, the state capital of Wanzhou had not been built yet. There were still many things for her to deal with in Qinzhou and Hu County. The officials were so busy that they wanted the people to have a good new year. When the people under her rule reunited with their families, Jiang Pingji, Lu Shi and Lu Zhao gathered for a simple dinner. Happy New Year! Jiang Pingji changed into a new set of clothes and accepted the New Year's gift from Lu Shi with a smile. Father, Happy New Year! Lu Zhao was still dressed like a rich young master. He was more particular about his clothes and accessories. Not to mention the material of his clothes, just the flower and bird fan in his hand was made of silk and the frame of the fan was made of sandalwood. It was exquisite like a work of art. Sister, Happy New Year! Lu Zhao said his New Year's greetings and looked at Jiang Pingji eagerly. He liked elegant and rich things. His daily clothes and accessories had to be perfumed before he wore them. The daily expenses were not small. Lu Zhao's life was tight with the fixed monthly allowance given by Lu Shi. He looked forward to getting a big red envelope from Jiang Pingji during the new year. Jiang Pingji could not help but smile. She replied with her greetings but did not take out the big red envelope that Lu Zhao had expected. Lu Zhao was speechless. He felt wronged. Did he have to continue eating dirt next month? When Lu Zhao was discouraged, Jiang Pingji said, I have sent someone to send it to your room. Lu Zhao's eyes suddenly lit up. He wanted to shout, Long live sister. Lu Shi was rather displeased. He is always chasing dogs and fighting cocks. He is ignorant and incompetent. If you continue to spoil him, he will rely on you in the future. Lu Zhao was most afraid of Lu Shi. Hearing him reprimand him, he quickly hid behind Jiang Pingji. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji was tall. Otherwise, how could she block Lu Zhao? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, So be it. It's not like I can't afford to raise him. Sister, if that's the case, can you ask father to give me a raise? Not only did Lu Zhao depend on his sister, but he also depended on his father. What made people sad and indignant was that after gnawing on him he was still a Moonlight Clan member. It couldn't be helped. He liked to live an exquisite and luxurious life, so his daily expenses were naturally not small. Lu Shi's face twitched. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't wear his sword during the new year, he would have drawn his sword and let Lu Zhao know why the flowers were so red. You're a man, yet you're so keen on living off a woman. Can't you have some backbone? There were only 3 people at the New Year's banquet, but this was Lu Zhao's first time celebrating the New Year with so many people. In the past, in the backyard of the Lu residence, Madame Guzhen was bedridden and Madame Hu did not like to see him. Even on a big day like the New Year, he would stay in his courtyard and eat the dinner prepared by the servants. In his eyes, there was nothing special about the New Year except that there were more rations. Lu Shi glared at Lu Zhao. Come over early tomorrow to pay your respects. Lu Zhao's expression instantly collapsed. Ever since Lu Shi retreated behind the scenes and handed over all the government affairs to Jiang Pingji, his life had been completely idle. At first he was not used to it, but after a long time he felt happy. Every day he would fish, walk the dog, play with the birds, visit friends, read and paint. He was happy, but Lu Zhao was completely gloomy. Once the old man was idle, he always liked to find things for himself to do. Lu Zhao's life became more and more difficult. Every day he was asked to do his homework. Due to his authority he obeyed for a while. After a long time he could not stand it anymore. He simply ran to Jiang Pingji's place to seek refuge. His biological sister was indeed his biological sister. Not only did she not protect him, but she also tied him up and sent him back to Lu Shi to receive education and love. Hearing Lu Shi ask him to pay his respects early tomorrow, Lu Zhao's scalp went numb. Sister, save me. Lu Zhao lowered his voice and shook Jiang Pingji's sleeves. His eyes sent out a signal for help. Amidst the howls of the audience in the streaming room, so cute, let auntie rub you, and streamer, you lack a sister-in-law, Jiang Pingji unceremoniously sold Lu Zhao out. She dodged sideways and heartlessly abandoned Lu Zhao, who had sent out the signal for help, leaving him to Lu Shi to deal with. On the 7th day of the new year the market reopened. Xianxia district was Jiang Pingji's original foundation. Under her painstaking management, it had been expanded again and again. Not only had the city walls been expanded, but the surrounding villages had also been included in the outer city and reorganized. Xianxia district was now one of the most prosperous areas in the north. After the new year the number of people on the streets increased sharply. Apart from the locals there were also many figures of outsiders. These outsiders were all Dongqing students who came because of its reputation. Some were from aristocratic families while others were from poor families. In their usual impression, Xianxia district should be a remote and backward small town. After experiencing the double suppression of the Tsingyi army and the Red Lotus group, it should be desolate and cold. Beyond their expectations, ever since they entered Wanzhou, the scenery they saw made them suspicious. Suspicious of what? They were suspicious of what year it was now. It was clearly a chaotic time, but in Wanzhou, it was a scene of prosperity. There were wars everywhere in Dongqing, and there were constant conflicts between the feudal vassals. Outside Wanzhou they could see refugees dressed in rags. Once they crossed the border they could see well-proportioned fields and straw in the middle of the fields. Occasionally they could see hard-working commoners and urchins. After entering the city they couldn't believe their eyes. The streets were neatly planned, the eaves were arranged neatly, the houses on the left and right were exquisite and elegant. The vendors on the street were all in high spirits, their faces glowing. Not only were they in good spirits, but the clothes they wore were also very clean. There were few patches on them. Happy New Year! In the streets and alleys, joyous celebrations could be heard everywhere. Happy New Year! A little girl in a red coat stood by the side of the road. She raised her head and looked at the vendor who was carrying the goods in a daze. The vendor didn't hear her at first, but the little girl shouted again seriously. After a while she gulped down a mouthful of saliva. The peddler finally noticed the little girl, and when he saw her delicate face, his expression became even gentler. Seeing that the little girl was staring at the honey hawthorn fruits he had made, he smiled and took one for her. Happy New Year! Take it and eat it. Just by looking at the child's attire he knew that he was from a wealthy family. Thank you. The little girl grinned and took the New Year's gift from the vendor. Before she could put it into her mouth, a weak-looking boy appeared beside her. The boy looked only 6 or 7 years old. He was thin, but his expression was very mature. The corners of his lips were tightly pursed. "Uncle, you have to do business too. You can't take advantage of others." He raised one hand and took the little girl's hand. With his other hand he took out a few coins from the money bag at his waist and gave it to the vendor. After saying that, he led the little girl away. The peddler took the money. Seeing the boy's attire and the book basket on his shoulder, he exclaimed in hindsight. Chapter 901. The outsider heard it and asked in surprise, "What Golden Scale Academy?" The peddler straightened his chest and said proudly, "It's an academy built by our prefecture magistrate." The outsider was also a scholar from a poor family who came because of its reputation. He had noticed the little girl in the red coat early on. After all, dyeing techniques were very low nowadays. The brighter the color, the more expensive it was. Those who could afford to wear such a bright red coat must be rich and extraordinary. Seeing that there was no servant by the girl's side, his sense of justice was triggered. He was afraid that someone would kidnap the child, so he stopped for a while. The person asked the peddler doubtfully, "When did the prefecture magistrate of Lu build an academy? Didn't he just build Golden Scale Pavilion?" "It was built a month ago. It's a place for children to study." It turned out to be a private school to teach children. Little did they know that it was not an ordinary private school. The reason for the establishment of Golden Scale Academy could be traced back to a few months ago. Yuan Jing, Qing Qing, Feng Ren, and 2 other highly respected scholars formed the initial teaching material compilation team. However, the teaching materials they compiled were too obscure for adults, let alone for children to learn. Jiang Pingji directly rejected their first version of the plan. She mentioned it unintentionally, prompting them to have the idea of opening an academy for children. They were knowledgeable, so they naturally felt that the beginner's teaching material was extremely shallow. However, children without any foundation would not understand. If they could not let the children understand, wouldn't their beginner's teaching material be useless? After careful consideration, they wanted to find a group of young children and test the beginner's teaching material on them. To put it bluntly, they would be lab rats. Jiang Pingji was happy to see it happen. She waved her hand and allocated land for them. She connected the original residences and turned them into an academy. She was too lazy to think of the name of the academy, so she directly used the name Golden Scale Pavilion. As for the source of students, Jiang Pingji was not worried. She directly selected children of suitable age from the orphans of the fallen soldiers. There were not only boys but also girls. This decision caused a few scholars to object, but Jiang Pingji shut their mouths with righteousness. She said, "They are all orphans of heroes. What's the difference in their identities? Some of the soldiers died young and had only one daughter. Their fathers fought for me. How can I treat their descendants differently because of their gender? Wouldn't it disappoint people if this got out?" Now that he said it, it seemed to make sense. After several rounds of careful selection, the first batch of students of the Golden Scale Academy had been selected. Their average age ranged from 5 to 7 years old. There were 100 boys and 100 girls. When Feng Zhen heard about this, he hurriedly made a scene with Jiang Pingji and stuffed his son inside. He was far away in Chongzhou and wouldn't be able to return to Wanzhou for the next few years. He couldn't keep letting his son study by himself, could he? If he had companions of the same age to study with him, perhaps it would make him more lively? Moreover, the first batch of lab rats. The first batch of students would definitely be taught by highly respected old scholars such as Yuan Jing. As it turned out, Feng Zhen was right. The teacher really did have the mirror of the deep abyss. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to give them some advice. The children should be divided into classes according to their age and learning progress. Previously, they had already mentioned the division of subjects. Now that they were going to be divided into classes and grades, it was not difficult for Yuan Jing and the others to accept it. In fact, dividing the students into classes was more efficient and targeted than letting all the students study together. After all that, Jiang Pingji suggested to make uniform clothing for the children. Master Yuan Jing was speechless. Why didn't he realize that this student was so good at making trouble? When he asked for the reason, she answered, "It's neat and uniform. It's comfortable to look at." It was a very good and powerful reason. Master Yuan Jing wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he let Jiang Pingji do it. Anyway, she was the one paying for the expenses. What was he worried about? Jiang Pingji let Su Ku and Feng Jin be in charge of the school uniforms. She found a tailor to measure each student's figure. What's missing? What's missing? Right, the school badge. Jiang Pingji was inspired. She designed the boys' and girls' uniforms. She even drew 5 flowers made of scales. Looking at the ready-made clothes made by the embroidery mother, Su Ku almost couldn't control the primitive power in his body. What was the experience of having a squandering lord? One could tell by looking at his current state. His lord wasn't spending money. She was throwing it away. The school uniform and the identity badge were equivalent to 2 months' worth of food for an ordinary family of 4. However, in all fairness, the school uniform that his lord mentioned was quite nice. The school uniform was blue and white. The collar was embroidered with an exquisite and elegant school badge. Every student was also given an identity badge. The basic information of the students was engraved on the front of the badge. On the north side was the school badge designed by Jiang Pingji. The bottom was engraved with cloud patterns. After choosing a good day, 200 students worshipped the portrait of their master and officially enrolled in the school. They learned literature in the morning and martial arts in the afternoon. The contents of the boys' and girls' classes were the same in the morning. It was all in the beginners' textbooks. It was different in the afternoon. The boys learned riding and shooting, while the girls learned the techniques of physical training, grappling, and needlework. The morning arrangements were for them to enter the school at 4:45 in the morning and leave at 4:45 in the afternoon. The afternoon arrangements were for them to enter the school at 4:45 in the morning and leave at 4:45 in the afternoon. If the children lived far away or had difficulties, the academy would also provide dormitories and meals. For this reason, Jiang Pingji specially transferred a good-tempered corporal from the military camp to be a martial arts instructor for the boys. She also asked Jiang Nongqin to transfer a few outstanding and patient female soldiers from the female camp to be the instructors for the girls. The techniques of physical training that the girls learned were the physical training techniques that Jiang Pingji had improved for the female soldiers. The children were still young and very malleable. When this batch of children grew up and the outside world saw the effects of the teaching, the girls' class in the Golden Scale Academy could truly gain a foothold. The blue and white school uniforms that these children wore gradually became a familiar symbol to the people of Xiangyang district. Wei Jingxian, who had finished her official duties for the day, returned home. As soon as she entered the main hall, she saw the boy from Feng Zhen's family reprimanding Chongqing rigidly. Chongqing, who was dressed in red, still had her head lowered. She stuck out her tongue and licked the bee sugar coating on the outside of the hawthorn fruit until it was wet. What situation was this? You can't leave the manor as you wish in the future. There are more and more outsiders and the security in the district is not as good as before. Chongqing has a wet nurse. After saying that, she slurped again. Sparkling saliva hung from the corner of her mouth. The sugar coating on the hawthorn fruit in her hand had also been licked away. That won't do. It was still dangerous for the elderly, the weak, women and children to encounter sudden incidents. Chongqing pouted, tears quickly gathered in her watery eyes. After a while she cried out loud. Wei Jingxian laughed and carried Chongqing up from the table. She said to Feng Yi, Chongqing is pestering you again? Feng Yi shook his head. You can only blame Chongqing for not being sensible and delaying your studies. Feng Yi said, the teacher's teachings are very simple. It was not considered a delay. No matter what, he was a child who started learning at the age of 3 and was personally taught by Feng Zhen. Feng Yi had a solid foundation. The content that the teacher taught was not difficult for him. Therefore, he still sought additional homework from the teacher during his spare time. Feng Yi, I love learning. Learning makes me happy. Chapter 902. More and more outsiders poured into Xiangyang district. The already bustling city became livelier. After the new year, the weather became brighter and warmer. At the ends of the streets, one could see travel-worn scholars everywhere. Similar discussions could be heard everywhere in the taverns, tea houses and eateries. I heard that the Jinlin Pavilion will open tomorrow? That's what the notice outside the district headquarters said. I wonder what the interior of the Jinlin Pavilion looks like? Is it the same inside and out or is it just a facade? The magistrate of Liuzhou built Wanzhou so well. She wouldn't simply boast, would she? Let's go take a look when the pavilion opens tomorrow. Some people talked about the Jinlin Pavilion, some talked about the current situation in the world, and some talked about Jiang Pingji. She governed Wanzhou until it was prosperous and no one could blame her. However, the things she had done all these years were both praised and criticized by the outside world. There were only 2 points that were mentioned most often: supporting the poor and harboring disloyalty. Needless to say, among the civil and military officials under her, apart from Feng Jin, who else was from a respectable and noble family? As for harboring disloyalty, it was enough to explain everything just by looking at the recruitment notice and the construction of the Jinlin Pavilion. Under everyone's anticipation, the Jinlin Pavilion officially opened on the 3rd of March, the Flower Festival. From its appearance, the Jinlin Pavilion was no different from ordinary mansions. It inherited the consistent architectural style of Xiangyang district, simple and elegant. There were soldiers standing guard everywhere outside. Each of them had a cold glint in their eyes and a resolute look on their faces. They stood there motionlessly. Yuan Jing, Feng Ren, and Qing Qing presided over the opening ceremony. After offering sacrifices to the gods, they personally pulled down the red silk covering the signboard. On the signboard, there were 3 big characters: Golden Scale Pavilion. The 3 characters were vigorous and powerful with a hint of nobility. The scholars waiting outside were blocked by the soldiers with their bodies. The whole place was silent. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the hands of Yuan Jing and the others. After the ceremony, the pavilion opens. Qing Qing and the others wore high hats and wide belts. Their sleeves fluttered and their expressions were solemn. With a squeak, the door of the Jinlin Pavilion opened. At that moment, several rows of soldiers passed through the crowd and arranged for the scholars to enter in an orderly manner. "Why can he enter but I can't?" The soldier in charge of inspection said. "You can't enter today without a token." "Token? What token?" The scholar who was stopped frowned fiercely. It seemed that he would not give up until he made it clear. The soldier said, "A few days ago the district headquarters put up a notice. Anyone who wants to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion has to register and take an examination first. Only after passing can they get a token." Nowadays, paper was still very expensive and books were even more difficult to find. It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't run into a book thief with bad character. Su Ku and the others slightly adjusted the threshold to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion. The assessment of literary talent was secondary. The most important thing was to take the opportunity to register the other party's information and put invisible shackles on them. You dare to cause trouble? Every wrong has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. I can always find you by following the vines to the melon. When the scholar heard this, he became angry. An ordinary citizen dared to point fingers at him. Just as he was about to explode, the youth waiting behind him said, "You'd better go and register. It's the same if you come back tomorrow. Don't stand here and waste other people's time." After saying that, the young man walked in front of him and handed over his token. After verifying the authenticity of the name and token, the soldier readily let him in. The scholar from before hurriedly flung his sleeves and angrily went to the side to register. On the other side, the scholars who had already entered let out exclamations of surprise. When they realized that they had lost their composure, they looked at the other people around them who were also stunned. They instantly felt better. They couldn't be blamed for being inexperienced. The scene inside the Golden Scale Pavilion was really beyond their expectations. Although it was called the Golden Scale Pavilion, there were more than one building and one pavilion inside. Currently, only the main building of the Golden Scale Pavilion was open to the public, which was also the largest building in the Golden Scale Pavilion. Looking at the name on the signboard, the crowd felt strange. But when they read the meaning carefully, they could feel the heroic spirit that hit them in the face. It couldn't be more appropriate to give the main building of the Golden Scale Pavilion such a name. The main building was in the shape of a huge ring, and the area it occupied was actually larger than that of an ordinary 2-sectioned house. There were 4 large doors, 8 small doors and 36 wooden windows with hollow patterns. When the door was opened, the interior was brightly lit. Rows of bookshelves surrounded the building in a ring. Many of the bookshelves were already filled with paper books. There was a sign on each bookshelf which briefly described the type of books on the bookshelf. The interior of the building was ingenious. The bookshelves themselves were divided into private rooms of various sizes. In the private rooms there were mats for people to rest on. Apart from that, there was also a writing table and a set of brush and ink. What was even more amazing was the design of the dome on the second floor. It made full use of natural light. Even if there was no oil lamp in the room, as long as there was sufficient light outside, the room wouldn't feel dark when the windows on the second floor were opened. This is... The scholars who were qualified to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion approached one after another. Some of them were even so excited that they forgot to speak. The Golden Scale Pavilion. The well-deserved Golden Scale Pavilion. The crowd calmed down. Someone was about to step forward to take a book from the bookshelf, but was unexpectedly stopped by someone. Before that person could speak, the person explained, although the books in the Golden Scale Pavilion are free to read, you can't touch them casually. If you want to read any book, just ask someone to bring it to you. If you want to borrow books and copy them, bring your token over there to register. We will provide brush and ink at a low price. The Golden Scale Pavilion had just opened. They didn't want anyone to maliciously destroy books or hide them. Therefore, they had to set up a strict system at the beginning. When the public got used to it, the Golden Scale Pavilion could appropriately relax the borrowing system. When the crowd heard this, they were a little unhappy at first. But considering the price of paper books, it was reasonable for the Golden Scale Pavilion to be stricter. There are so many books here, the manager said with a smile. There are still 90% of books that are still in the bookstore and haven't been put on the shelves. There's still 90%. The others were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Of course. There are still 60% of the bookshelves on the first floor that are empty. The second floor is completely empty. The crowd was so shocked that they were numb. One after another, they borrowed the books that they liked and found a well-lit place to read quietly. Rather than reading, it was more like they were stroking the pages with their fingers, as if they were caressing the skin of their loved ones. The touch was too good. They were even more shocked than when Suku saw the bamboo paper for the first time. The first batch of people who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion consisted of about 100 people. Almost all of them were book lovers. They treated the thread-bound books in their hands as if they were their ancestors. Not to mention destroying them, they didn't even dare to use a little bit of force. Seeing this, the manager of the Golden Scale Pavilion heaved a sigh of relief. Not long after, someone made a request to make a copy. That person looked nervous. He was afraid that his request would be rejected. It was good enough to let people read the books for free. Why would they let others make a copy? For most people, books weren't books. They were priceless treasures. They wouldn't lend them out easily. The receptionist smiled. She turned around and fetched a set of brush and ink as well as blank bamboo slips that had never been used before. These bamboo slips weren't provided for free, but the price was only 10% of the market price. Thank you. After the person thanked the receptionist, he took the things back to his seat. He read silently while making a copy. Unknowingly, the sun was setting. It was time for the bookstore to close. They returned the books reluctantly and stepped out of the Golden Scale Pavilion. Good reviews. Definitely 10 stars. Chapter 903. The popularity of the Golden Scale Pavilion continued to ferment. It was like a shy and delicate flower, emitting a rich and alluring fragrance that constantly attracted its prey to come one after another. The other feudal lords could only watch the heat. Jiang Pingji lived in Chengzhou, but she knew the situation in Wanzhou like the back of her hand. The fish in the pond have been kept for a long time. The fish are fat now. It's a good time to fish. She looked at the official documents sent by Su Ku and the others. Coincidentally, Qiguan Rang came in with a pile of bamboo slips. She hurriedly said, "Wenning, come over and help me draft a document." Qiguan Rang saw the smile on her face and could not help but ask, "Has something good happened, my lord?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Of course it's something good. If it's done, I'll make up for the 3 years of vacation that I owe you." Qiguan Rang had worked for Jiang Pingji for more than 2 years. He had experienced 3 new years, but he had never taken a vacation. Although the salary was not low, it still could not make up for the bitterness of being busy from the beginning to the end of the year. His lord's credibility had fallen to the bottom. Unless Qiguan Rang was stupid, he would not believe a word about the vacation. He did not believe it, but he said, "All right, I'll grind the ink now." Jiang Pingji said, "Xiaoyu and Huayu told me that as of now, there are 3,963 scholars who have borrowed books from the Golden Scale Pavilion." When Qiguan Rang heard the number, he almost dropped the pen in his hand. There are 3,963 people? To enter the Golden Scale Pavilion, one had to go through a simple assessment. Only those who passed the assessment had the right to register their name and make a token. As long as they checked the number of tokens, they could know how many people had entered the Golden Scale Pavilion. Jiang Pingji also used this method to collect basic information about the scholars. Entering and exiting the Golden Scale Pavilion, borrowing books and copying books had to be registered. Therefore, she could know how long each person had read, which books they had read, and which books they had copied. Based on the information, she could also roughly judge whether the person was eager to learn, whether they had perseverance, and how good their foundation was. Unknowingly, most of the information about these people had been leaked. Among these people, there is no lack of talented people. I plan to recruit targeted people. Although we are also cultivating our own talents, it will still take a few years. We can't always let one of you do the work of 10 people. If you become exhausted, I will feel distressed. The so-called conscription was actually a system to promote talents. As the governor of the prefecture, Jiang Pingji naturally had the right to do so. After Qiguan Rang heard this, he snorted softly and did not comment. If his lord took pity on them, why would she owe him 3 years of leave in a row? 3 years, 7 days of annual leave a year, a total of 21 days. They were all swallowed by his lord. Does my lord mean that you want to promote talents from among these scholars? Jiang Pingji said, of course. They've already sent themselves to me. How can I let them go so easily? I painstakingly built the Golden Scale Pavilion for them to study and learn for free. Could it be that I'm doing all this for someone else so that they can rely on the other party after they grow up? We will first select those with good character and talent to alleviate the predicament of the shortage of manpower. As for the rest, you can come and go as you please. The corner of Qiguan Rang's mouth twitched. He had really underestimated his lord. She was really a good businessman. Her ability to pluck feathers from wild geese was amazing. If it was someone else, they might not have had such a good reaction like her. Not only could she draw inferences about other cases from one instance, but she could also exploit them over and over again. My lord, I'm afraid it's difficult to distinguish who's better and who's worse based on this information alone. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, this is simple. Why don't we use the banner of making friends through literature and set a few difficult questions to test everyone every day? Then let the prestigious scholars be the judges. They'll score everyone's answers and list out who's better and who's better. Every day, the top 3 will receive meal vouchers from the guest house. With the voucher, they can eat 3 meals a day at the guest house. Each meal will provide 2 meat dishes, 2 vegetables, and 1 soup for free. In this way, they could not only get a clear understanding of everyone's talents and knowledge, but they could also build a reputation for the guest house in Wanzhou. Qiguan Rang sighed as he wrote quickly. His lord was a profiteer who was held back by her ambition to dominate the world. Not long after, Qiguan Rang finished writing a document and handed it to Jiang Pingji to read. If there were no problems with the content, this document could be sent to Wanzhou urgently. By the way, remember to get the messenger to look for Jing Tu and ask him if he wants to bring anything along. Why should I look for General Fu Wang? Qiguan Rang was surprised. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and muttered, looking at the time, Hui Jun will be giving birth soon. Qiguan Rang understood immediately. If one did not live in this era where books were scarce, one would never understand people's thirst for knowledge. There were always students who waited outside the Jinlin Pavilion before dawn. They only left reluctantly when the pavilion closed. Sometimes they did not even have time to tidy up their appearances. They studied hard day and night, diligently practicing without stopping. In order not to kill anyone, Suk especially arranged for people to set up a free canteen in the Jinlin Pavilion. Everyone could receive a bowl of thick meat porridge with their identity token. They even opened up a few quiet courtyards for the scholars to take a break or discuss scriptures in their spare time. In just 3 months, the name of the Jinlin Pavilion in Wanzhou had spread throughout the whole of Dongqing. It even had the tendency to spread to other countries. On this day, the scholars stayed in the Jinlin Pavilion as usual. Some frowned in deep thought, some discussed with their friends in low voices, and some copied seriously. At this moment, a notice quietly appeared in the Jinlin Pavilion. What's this? A commoner dressed in linen felt his stomach was empty. He carefully got up from his seat and was about to receive a bowl of meat porridge to fill his stomach when he happened to see the notice board outside the door. He fixed his eyes on it and revealed some confusion on his face. Guest house. What is this place? It was obvious that it was something created by merchants. It was full of the stench of money. The passing scholars frowned unhappily. The commoner said, "This guest house is a restaurant established by the magistrate of Liuzhou. The profits of the restaurant are used to settle down the orphans of the soldiers." Hearing that it was a restaurant established by Jiang Pingji, the scholar's expression softened a little. If it was used in the right way, he could reluctantly tolerate merchants doing business in the Jinlin pavilion. He also went forward to read the contents of the notice board carefully. He suddenly became interested. It was not that most of the scholars could not afford to eat. At the very least, the Jinlin pavilion provided meat porridge for free. One bowl was enough to fill one's stomach. What they cared about was ranking and winning. If they answered well, they would gain the favor of the scholars and their social status would immediately rise to a higher level. Hearing the news, many interested scholars hurriedly brought their brushes, ink and bamboo slips over to copy the questions. It was only the first day, but there were as many as 100 people who participated in answering the questions. Chapter 904. Of course, the so-called guidance was not teaching them face-to-face, but adding a few comments on the bamboo slips they submitted. Even so, when the first 3 scholars saw the name of the reviewer on the bamboo slips, they were so excited that they could not speak. The reviewer was none other than the famous teacher, Master Yuan Jing. In layman's terms, not only did they get their idol's autograph, but they also got their idol's guidance. They were so happy that they almost fainted. One should not think that idol chasing only existed in modern times. The ancient people were just as enthusiastic about idol chasing. Throwing fruits into a cart was a small matter. There were even brainless fans, who wrote poems to express their love for idol chasing every few days. Speaking of brainless fans, Master Yuanjing had many brainless fans. A ready-made example was Tang Yao. He was Master Yuanjing's brainless fan. With his admiration for Master Yuanjing, he resolutely left his family and traveled thousands of miles to Langyi County to study. After the news spread, the number of people who submitted bamboo slips soared to thousands on the second day. Master Yuanjing was speechless. The old man had to correct and read thousands of bamboo slips in one night. Therefore, for the sake of their lives, the exam that was supposed to be done once a day became once every 7 days. Ching saw Master Yuanjing's pale face and took the initiative to help him review. If he was lucky, he could discover young people with potential. It turned out that Jiang Pingji's method was very effective. Don't look at how there were only 10 questions each time, but each question hit a very targeted probe. Most of the scholars did not realize that there was something fishy about it. Only a few people who were more sensitive noticed it. Faintly, they felt that it was related to their future, so they paid more attention to the questions. Every time, they deliberated over the questions repeatedly before writing. They did not give a general answer. Instead, they chose to explore deeply, speak freely, and express their opinions directly. In fact, most of the people's literary talent could not catch Master Yuanjing's attention, but he could occasionally find 1 or 2 outstanding works that made his eyes light up. After a few corrections, Master Yuanjing smiled helplessly. There are many moldable talents among them. There is an 80% chance that they will be recruited by the magistrate of Liuzhou. From the contents of the previous answers, many people had realized the hidden meaning behind the 10 questions. At first, they were perfunctory. Later on, they were very attentive. Even a fool could see the motivation behind this change. Jiang Pingji was not very attractive to the scholars who came from aristocratic families. What about those scholars from poor families? Once they were fortunate enough to receive Jiang Pingji's conquests, it was tantamount to reaching the sky in a single bound. The road to success was directly paved under their feet. Ching thought for a moment and said, "Although the Lu Prefecture's overseer is powerful, there aren't many people who can be used. Naturally, he has to recruit talents." This kind of assessment method was truly unheard of and unseen. Compared to this, I'm worried about something else. When Yuan Jing heard that, he immediately understood what Ching was worried about. Conscription was a way to promote talents. However, this was not a one-way way. It was a two-way street and did not have any coercive power. Conquests were also a form of courtesy. The conquered could gladly accept the offer, but he could also decline it. Jiang Pingji had the right to conquer someone in her territory, and that person also had the right to reject her. If they didn't accept the conquests, some people did it because they really did not want to be an official. They wanted to live in seclusion and live a carefree life. Some people wanted to gain reputation. For example, if a beautiful girl from a poor family rejected the love of a domineering CEO, the beautiful girl would instantly become famous. Of course, there was a third situation which was to keep people in suspense. In layman's terms, some people felt that the easier it was to get, the less it would be treasured. Therefore, they would decline it again and again. When the other party's appetite was at its highest, they would gladly accept the conquests, and it would become a good story between the ruler and the minister. Conscription not accepting was an unspoken rule in the industry. Generally, people would refuse the first time and only agree to be an official after the second or third time. Qing was a little worried. Would the seedlings he favored lose their minds and play conscription in front of Jiang Pingji? Based on his understanding of the governor, he was proud. If she was rejected once, she would not do it a second time. Those who wanted to keep people in suspense would go overboard. Master Yuan Jing and Qing looked at each other tacitly. They suddenly felt an indescribable sense of melancholy. They felt that there would definitely be people who would not accept the conscription. As expected, there were people who did it. There was more than one person. After several attempts, the talent assessment was almost done. Su Ku followed Jiang Pingji's wishes and extended an olive branch to the 28 young people. Among the 28 people, 10 were born poor, 11 were from destitute gentry families, and the other 7 were from gentry families with average family backgrounds. They were all between 20 and 40 years old. They were in their golden years and had a lot of room for nurturing. In the end, among the 28 people, 20 accepted the conscription and the rest all rejected. Su Ku was speechless. When he heard the news, his expression was as black as the bottom of a pot. Reading for free, borrowing books, copying books, freeloading the meat porridge provided by the Golden Scale Pavilion, eating to their heart's content with meal vouchers from the reception house. During the conscription, they should at least give them some face. How could they reject them so decisively? Would it kill them to be a little more tactful and save face for both sides? How infuriating. Su Ku was so angry that he could not swallow his rice. Wanzhou had spent a lot of effort to select 28 people from thousands of people, but nearly 1/3 of them had rejected the conscription. At that moment, Su Ku could not help but think, just how despised was Wanzhou. What place in Dongqing could be more peaceful than here? This was already considered a paradise in troubled times, right? When other places could not afford to pay salaries, the average salary in Wanzhou was very high, okay? Benefits were also available. After the probation period, they would immediately have a car, a house, and savings. They would be at the peak of their lives. What a beautiful prospect. The only shortcoming of their master was her gender. In other conditions, she could crush the other feudal forces with 100% certainty. So what if she was a woman? Did she eat their rice? Or did these people think that the forces in Wanzhou were still grassroots and did not deserve to have a golden phoenix? Su Ku wanted to scratch his hair in frustration, but he restrained the impulse. As the chief accountant of Wanzhou and the big boss in charge of finance, he could not lose his composure. Therefore, Su Ku's mind was unusually active, but he appeared cold on the surface. He stared at the document on the table as if he was staring at an enemy. It was not until Feng Jin entered that he saw him like this that he went forward to read the contents of the document. After reading it, his brows furrowed. These people really don't know what's good for them. Su Ku said through gritted teeth. Feng Jin smiled and said, indeed. Since they didn't accept the conscription, then they should just choose someone else. There's no need to be angry. Su Ku's face was gloomy. He said, how can I not be angry? If word gets out now, won't my lord be laughed at? It was fine if 28 people were to be conscripted at once, but 8 people had rejected it. Wasn't this a slap in the face? Feng Jin said in surprise, what does this have to do with my lord being laughed at? Jin had also seen the answers of these people and they were indeed quite talented. There's ambition in their words. I'm afraid the reason why they rejected the conscription is to build momentum and build a reputation for themselves. One more conscription will do. Su Ku suddenly understood, but then he said angrily, with my lord's temperament, how can she do a second conscription? Feng Jin said straightforwardly, then ignore it. There are other candidates anyway. Chapter 905. There was only one chance. If he didn't grasp it, how could he blame others for not giving him a second chance? How could that be? Feng Jin smiled and comforted Su Ku in case his colleague was angered to the point of causing trouble. It wasn't that Su Ku didn't understand this, but he was still a little indignant. After a while he said, "No matter what, we still have to consult the Lord about this and see what she decides." Feng Jin said, "Of course." Even though they understood Jiang Pingji's temper and knew that she wouldn't go for a second conscription, they couldn't make decisions for her. As expected, Jiang Pingji, who was far away in Chengzhou, received the news. She was so angry that she wanted to laugh. The conscription was rejected? Since they don't think highly of me, I won't force them. Wenjing, draft a document and tell Xiaoyu what to do. Everything will be done according to the rules. Although 20 people agreed, we still don't have enough manpower. Let him continue to filter. Qiguan Rang cupped his hands in acknowledgement. No matter what reason they had for rejecting the conscription, Jiang Pingji would grant them their wish. There was only one chance, and it was always given to those who were prepared. Who would stretch out their face to be slapped a second time after being slapped in the face once. She didn't want her dignity. In the words of the livestream viewers, one had to have the capital to be pretentious. If he wasn't Zhuge Liang, why would he bother with 3 visits to the thatched cottage? Shushen Yali, streamer, don't be angry. Pat your head. Luoyu treading on flowers. It's their loss to lose the chance. Without these people, there are still millions of talents waiting for the streamer. Xiao. In modern times, the streamer is like the CEO of a company. They are freshmen who applied for a job. The company has already decided to hire them, but the freshmen arrogantly rejected them. At this point, they still expect the company's CEO to personally invite them? Do they really think they're Zhuge Liang? Pia Wiang. I realize that your focus is a little off. Isn't the focus on the streamer's method of promoting talents? The bullet screen was quickly drowned out by the sea of bullet screens. Qiguan Rang, who was at the side, stole a glance at Feng Zhen. He noticed that the latter was smiling with his eyes squinted, as if he was watching a good show from the sidelines. At noon, Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen went out together. He lowered his voice and asked, "Zisher, what were you laughing at just now?" Feng Zhen held a bag of dried and pickled radishes in his hands. He ate them as he walked. He had stolen them from the Chongzhou guest house branch. It was salty with a hint of spiciness and could be used as a snack to grind the teeth. Fortunately, Qiguan Rang wasn't Feng Jin. Otherwise, how could he stand the sight of Feng Zhen chewing on dried carrots as he walked? She would definitely reprimand him for his lack of manners. Feng Zhen laughed and said, "If I don't laugh, am I supposed to go forward and advise my lord to be magnanimous?" "Of course not." Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows and said, "Those 8 people. What a pity." It was an unspoken rule in the industry to refuse a conquest. As long as the person wasn't uninterested in fame or looked down on others, they would usually agree to a second conquest. Feng Zhen said, "Don't you know the Lord's temperament?" She was very clear in her heart, but she was unwilling to put down her pride and go on a second expedition. Without these 8 people, there would always be others to fill in. If the person who failed was a peerless genius who could conquer the world, he would have the resources to do so, but he was not. It's already good enough that my lord didn't curse him in her heart, let alone go on a second expedition. Qiguan Rang let out a long sigh. How could he not know this? I'm afraid that my lord will be criticized and scolded for being narrow-minded. Can you tolerate such words? What he was afraid of was taking advantage of the situation and directly using his lord's gender as an excuse, saying that a woman was a woman, short-sighted and narrow-minded. Other people could be magnanimous enough to go on a second expedition, but why was she so unreasonable when it came to her, putting on airs after being rejected once? She was so unforgiving and unworthy. Didn't she know that talented people were precious and needed to be accommodated? Feng Zhen laughed and said, "Of course I can't tolerate it, but forcing my lord to bend over and do something she doesn't want to do is even more intolerable." Qiguan Rang glanced at Feng Zhen. From his words, it was as if he couldn't bear to see his lord suffer. He raised his hand and snatched the dried carrots from Feng Zhen's hand. "Let's see what else this guy could eat." Feng Zhen cried out in sorrow, "Let's talk things out. Don't steal my snacks." When the news reached Wanzhou, Su Ku and the others already knew what to do. The first batch of people who agreed to go on the expedition had long been thrown to their posts to hone themselves. He, Feng Jin, and the others still had to keep an eye on them at all times to prevent any mistakes. The few of them were still steady and honest, and now they were on the right track. With these people, Su Ku clearly felt his workload lighten. Finally, he didn't have to go home day and night. After receiving Jiang Pingji's reply, Suku immediately started on the second expedition. This time he focused on selecting talents in agriculture and water conservancy. Even when the second batch of names was out, the first batch of people who failed to go on the expedition were still anxiously waiting for news. After waiting for a long time, there was still no news. Finally, someone couldn't sit still. This person had used a lot of connections to find out the news. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. My lord said that a melon that is forcefully picked won't be sweet. Since you have other plans, I wish you success in your career. The person was so angry that his face turned pale. He was ashamed, angry, and embarrassed. Finally, he snorted coldly and angrily flicked his sleeves. A woman is a woman after all. She is shallow and narrow-minded. What kind of future can someone who seeks revenge for the smallest grievance have? Even if we don't talk about being courteous, we should at least have tolerance and magnanimity. Now that I've seen her, she really isn't worth it to rely on. A real man has aspirations. How can he succumb to a woman whose eyelids are as small as beans? It's painful and pitiful. Out of the 8 people who failed to go on the expedition, only 2 chose to remain silent. The other 6 couldn't bear the injustice. They didn't shout abuse, but when they talked about the world situation with their friends, they would always criticize Jiang Pingji. Once their friends spoke up for Jiang Pingji, they would always be refuted. This woman's eyes are as small as beans. If she didn't rely on the reputation of her father, Lu Shi, how could she have the foundation she has today? She's just a woman. Does she really think she can overturn the universe and reverse yin and yang? Don't be fooled by her limitless glory now. In fact, there are many hidden dangers. So what if she controls Chongzhou, Wanzhou, and Hu County? The northern borderline is eyeing her covetously in the north, and the fake emperor is preparing for war in the south. Let's wait and see how long this ignorant woman can be arrogant. Most of the literati cared about their reputation. Even if they didn't say anything, they wouldn't scold her for getting free food, drinks, and books. These people were particularly unconventional and stood out from the crowd. The establishment of the Jinling Pavilion in Wanzhou attracted many scholars to flock there. These people stimulated the domestic demand of the economy. Not only did they make Wanzhou's economy flourish, but they also made Wanzhou's literary style flourish. Many like-minded scholars gathered together. They either discussed poetry, gave advice on the country, or recited poems and paintings. The literary atmosphere was strong. The literary gathering was open to the public. Naturally, the words and deeds of these people spread to the ears of Suku and the others. Bastards. Such despicable people, they're simply. Suku was so angry that he slammed the table. It was almost the end of the month. He had to handle more and more things. He slept less and was in a bad mood. Now that he heard slander, he almost exploded with anger. Qing Yuan passed by the door with a stack of bamboo slips in his arms. He heard the commotion inside and let out a long sigh. Suku's temper had always been good. Who had the ability to make him so irritable? Chapter 906. Jiang Pingji had always treated the civil and military officials under her as little dukes, but how could they not treat their lord as a daughter and accommodate her? Suku was so angry that her menopause was acting up prematurely. The vile person in her heart had already turned into a shrew. She wanted nothing more than to roll up her sleeves and kill those people. If he didn't give them a few slaps, he wouldn't know why the flowers were so red. Did they really think that Wanzhou was a charity? Did he really think that they were the stupidest idiots in the world? Did he really think that he could borrow, copy, and read the rich books of the Golden Scale Pavilion without any scruples? Motherf *Ker eat their food, use their food, live in their house, read their books, and in the end put down her bowl and chopsticks and scold them? Which emperor gave him the right to do so? Seeing that the black aura surrounding Suku was getting thicker and thicker, as if he had hit a bottleneck, Wanzhou's chief steward Suku finally flipped out. Gong Liao, come in. When Qing Yuan, who happened to pass by, heard this, his scalp went numb. He had an ominous premonition. Even though Suku had been in charge of internal affairs all these years and was practically rooted in Xiangyang district, rarely going out for official business, Qing Yuan did not dare to look down on him. Official Registrar Su, what can I do for you? Suku said with a gloomy face, there's something I want you to do. Ruining his mistress's reputation in Wanzhou was no longer just taking advantage of her. If this matter reaches the ears of the Lord, she will definitely reprimand us for not governing properly. It was fine if she was reprimanded, But she was afraid that the world would misunderstand that the Lord was not strict in her governance, that she was timid and that anyone could humiliate her. Gong Liao, do you understand? Qing Yuan said, I understand. In layman's terms, anyone who bullied their lord would be crushed to death. Su Ke's expression softened a little as he said to Qing Yuan, Gong Liao, come closer and talk. Qing Yuan obediently stepped forward and sat down beside Su Ke's desk. The two of them whispered to each other. When Qing Yuan heard this, his expression changed from solemnity to surprise and finally to pity. Originally he was filled with righteous indignation at those people who had failed in the conquest, but now he felt some sympathy for them. Of all the people he could have offended, why did he have to offend these unreasonable people from Wanzhou? His father was right. Wanzhou was a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Su Ke was indeed of humble birth, but when it came to managing internal affairs he ranked in the top 3 in the entire Wanzhou group. In the whole of Dongqing he was probably in the top 5. Not only was this person in charge of internal affairs, but he was also deeply trusted by the Lord. There was almost no mess that he could not solve. Once Su Ke made up his mind to punish someone he could really do it. Qing Yuan had a mild temperament. His greatest strength was that he was obedient and filial. Qing asked him to restrain his edge and learn humbly. He would never stand out. He followed Qing Cheng's instructions and assisted Su Ke and the others. While he was busy, he learned how to manage the overall situation and accumulate experience for the future. My lord is ambitious, and her vision will definitely not be limited to one state or one county. When the shop was completely opened in the future, she would definitely send her trusted aides to various places. That would be a good opportunity for Qing Yuan to display his talents. In the end, Qing Yuan said worriedly, Registrar Su, if we do this, I'm afraid the outside world will say something bad about the Lord. For example, as the Lord of a province he didn't have the magnanimity to tolerate, and insisted on competing with a few scholars who said the wrong things. How shameful was that? Su Ke sneered and said, Do you think the common people have more mouths or those pedantic scholars have more mouths? This time Qing Yuan did not speak. Su Ke said, I remember that Zixiao had a very good saying. Qing Yuan asked curiously, What did Master Zixiao say? Offend anyone but not a writer. At that time Qing Yuan did not understand what it meant, but after a few days he understood. The scholars who failed in the conquest spouted nonsense and slandered Jiang Pingji everywhere. For several days in a row, there was no reaction from Wanzhou. The 6 of them were even more rampant, jumping up and down incessantly. The other 2 still wanted to save face, wishing that their presence could be reduced to 0. Brothers, what does this mean? It means that the magistrate of Wanzhou also knows that gossip is a fearful thing and has admitted defeat. Those people in Wanzhou are just actors from a grassroots troupe, inferior people who don't know Confucius and Mencius. I'm ashamed to be associated with them. A man is indomitable. Not to mention establishing a career, but he can't be subservient to a woman. If anyone were to accept the conquests, wouldn't they be admitting that they were inferior to an ignorant woman? It's really shameful and ridiculous for a man to lose all his courage. I'm afraid that even in the underworld he'll still be slapped by his ancestors. They refused the conquests not to raise their value and reputation, but because they completely disdained it, understand? They disdained to work for a woman. The more they danced, the more cowardly Wanzhou appeared. Their uncharacteristic silence made many people laugh at them. However, they were soon unable to laugh. The Su Ke did not show his power. Did they really think he was a housekeeper? The questions for this round are out. They're out? Let's go take a look. A test every 7 days had now become a routine, and it had faintly become one of the ways to select talents in Wanzhou. This way did not require family background, appearance, or virtue, only ability and talent. If they met the standards, even if they came from a humble background, they could still enter the eyes of the forces in Wanzhou. For many poor children who sought refuge with no families, this was a golden opportunity to leap over the dragon's gate. Every time the results were released, it would always attract a large number of scholars to come and watch. A group of people gathered in front of the notice board. Except for a few simple-minded people, the others saw the questions clearly and felt a chill in their hearts. Unlike the 10 questions announced in the past, there was only one question this time. Repaying enmity with kindness? How do you repay kindness? What kind of question is this? The saint has already given the answer, so of course it's repaying enmity with kindness. No one knew which simple-minded person spoke up, but everyone's expressions did not look too good. This answer had been stamped by the saint, so of course they knew, but when they thought about recent events, they felt that things were not looking good. How is this a test? It's clearly a declaration of war, someone couldn't help but mutter. What declaration of war? There were quite a lot of simple-minded people. They only cared about being top students and didn't hear the gossip of the outside world. Zhou is clearly telling others that they want to repay enmity with kindness. Not to mention anything else, at least Zhou had built the Golden Scale Pavilion and provided tens of thousands of books for them to read for free. Was this not kindness? Many people received kindness but did not know how to be grateful and shamelessly made a false accusation. Was this not resentment? Therefore Zhou could not be blamed for choosing to repay enmity directly, to get back at them. They could only blame the ungrateful ingrates for being too arrogant. Naturally, the 6 people had also seen the contents of the notice. Except for the 3 scholars from poor families who were anxious, the other 3 did not take it to heart. If Zhou really had the ability, they could have just sent people to arrest them. Why did they have to take such a roundabout route? Unfortunately, these people did not know that in another plane far away, there was an honest and upright official named Xianxia. Otherwise, they would not have such a stupid idea. Xianxia was a good and honest official. Because he had offended a screenwriter, he had become a peerless scumbag whose name would be passed down through the ages. Chapter 907. When it came to scumbags, they thought of Xianxia. They thought of how he abandoned his wife and son in order to curry favor with the rich and powerful. He could be said to be the representative of scumbags since ancient times. How many people knew that not only did Xianxia not abandon his wife and son, but he was also an honest, upright and outspoken official. This was the power of scholars. With a pen they could poke a person on the pillar of shame in history and be spurned by people for generations to come. As for the truth? Haven't you heard of this saying? Open your mouth to start a rumor but run your legs to refute it? The people loved melodramatic gossip and preferred stories with ups and downs. As for the truth, few people cared. That Lucy is really a shrew. Does she want to shed all pretense of cordiality and hold it against us? She's a woman. How can she not hold a grudge? Someone snorted disdainfully, but there was a flash of guilt in his eyes. However, this trace of guilt was quickly buried. Jinlin Pavilion was open to the public for free. They had also obtained the right to enter the pavilion. Of course, they were qualified to enjoy all the benefits inside. They did not owe Zhou anything. Whether it was borrowing books, copying books, or other benefits, they were all voluntarily provided by Zhou. Since it was voluntary, they could not be considered to have received Zhou's favor. In this way, how could it be considered to be returning good for evil? Did Zhou still want to act like a hooligan and demand repayment? They verbally despised Jiang Pingji's gender, but they were not too stupid. After all, Jiang Pingji had power and influence, but they did not. When they saw the topic on the notice board, they panicked for a while, then immediately comforted themselves. 2 days passed and nothing happened. As expected, it's just a bluff. They had been quiet for 2 days, but now they jumped out again. Not only did they slander Jiang Pingji, but they even criticized Jinlin Pavilion. No matter how they became famous, at least their reputation was better than many unknown people. Black and red were still red. However, the atmosphere was not right. And they could not laugh anymore. The scholars who had been chatting with them were all gone. Every time they approached them to discuss something, they would always be rejected with all sorts of reasons. When many familiar faces saw their faces, they covered their noses with their sleeves and quickly walked around them. Occasionally they could even hear people whispering and glancing at them from time to time. Their eyes were filled with disdain. My dear brothers, in the courtyard of the poetry meet he saw a few friends sitting on the ground in the distance. Everyone had a satisfied smile on their faces as though they were discussing something. One of them came forward, but before he could bow, the others scattered like birds and beasts. That person stood rooted to the ground like a block of wood. His face turned red and then green. He was both embarrassed and angry. With great difficulty he managed to stop a young, thin and weak scholar and interrogate him. No matter what, he was still a fighter who dared to fight against power. Why did others treat him like this? The scholar said, You still don't know what happened? I've been focused on studying the ancient books these days. How could I have the time to care about what's going on outside? There were too many good books in the Golden Scale Pavilion, and he always felt that he didn't have enough time to study. When the scholar from a poor family heard this, the disdain in the depths of his eyes deepened. Before he could react, the scholar said, "If you don't know, you can go to the golden scale market for a while and you'll know." After saying this, the scholar from a poor family was afraid that others would see him mingling with him, so he hurriedly left. The golden scale market was a commercial market not far from the golden scale pavilion. It was also specially built by Jiang Pingji. The golden scale pavilion brought a large flow of people, which was an excellent business opportunity. The flow of people was huge and the business was prosperous. Many people embarked on the road to becoming rich. The golden scale market was full of shops. This was an era where entertainment was lacking. Only Wanzhou had some variety. Many scholars liked to listen to storytellers there. Under Wei Xi's leadership, the storytelling industry in Wanzhou was under the unified jurisdiction of the government. The industry rules were strict. He even found a few talented novelists who specialized in collecting current affairs and gossip. He asked them to compile them into novels and use the storytellers' mouths to tell them to the people. He also set a rule. Absolutely no one could say anything unfavorable to Jiang Pingji, not even half a word. Of course, they could not be overly exaggerated. They tried their best to let the people understand a real lord. Wei Xi used entertainment to control public opinion, and now it was beginning to show results. The people loved their Wanzhou magistrate very much. There were even unmarried women who cried and shouted that they wanted to marry her, even if she was a woman. This meme was even adapted into a script by the novelist. It became the most popular novel in Wanzhou for a time. Probably because the novelist's literary talent was too good, many people were moved to tears. Say, why can't lovers be together in the end? So what if they are both women? Infatuated people should be treated gently. Stories like this made the bystanders dumbfounded. However, the dumbfounded protagonist today was someone else. That person heard the words of the scholar and hurried to the golden scale market. When he passed by a tea house, he suddenly heard his name. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw many people surrounding the tea house. A storyteller in a scholarly robe was telling a story with great emotion. He stood still and listened for a while. His expression became darker and darker. After a long time, the storyteller patted the ruler and said, "If you want to know more, listen to the next chapter." After saying that, he returned to his seat and drank a mouthful of tea to moisten his lips. The people nearby wailed, "You old man, aren't you a little too disloyal? Why are you deliberately blocking here and making people unable to go up or down?" That's right. Finish it in one go. If you don't finish, I feel like there's a cat scratching at my heart. Sigh, I can't sleep today. Even storytellers can't be so broken. You're obviously deliberately leaving people hanging. One day, with a knife in hand, I'll kill all the sequence-breaking dogs in the world. The storyteller raised his eyelids and said, "How is it that I'm unwilling to speak? It's clearly that I haven't gotten the manuscript for the next chapter." The people fell silent, but after a moment, they were filled with righteous indignation again. That Zhao Kuang is really shameless. He holds his bowl to eat and then puts it down to curse. Even the women in the brothel wouldn't be so shameless. Hey, I'm not happy when you say that. What's wrong with the women in the brothel? They give money in one hand and take off their pants in the other. It's a proper transaction. They're not like those people, each more shameless than the other. It's just like the book said. More than 10 years of sage books have been learned by the dog. When Zhao Kuang, who was outside the tea house, heard this, his chest tightened and he almost vomited blood. He hurriedly grabbed someone to ask about the contents of the book. That person was also enthusiastic and opened his mouth. A young man named Zhao Kuang heard that a free academy had opened in another country. He and 5 like-minded friends went there to study. Unexpectedly, they encountered bandits and the 6 of them got separated. Zhao Kuang was also lucky. He was saved by a simple tree demon in the mountains. Zhao Kuang was surprised by the beauty of the tree demon. He used flowery words to trick the tree demon into liking him and coaxed the simple tree demon to follow him. Little did he know that Zhao Kuang already had a wife in his hometown. A few days later, Zhao Kuang continued on his journey with the money provided by the tree demon. When he arrived at the academy, Zhao Kuang squandered without restraint. He pretended to be a noble son of an aristocratic family and gained the favor of a great scholar surnamed Lu. The great scholar felt that Zhao Kuang's temperament wasn't firm. after testing him, he didn't intend to put him in an important position. Coincidentally, Zhao Kuang heard that the great scholar had countless books and went to borrow some from the great scholar. The great scholar borrowed them and Zhao Kuang benefited greatly from the books. Using this opportunity, he received help from a noble and was promoted all the way. After he became famous, the tree demon came to Zhao Kuang to repay his debt. However, Zhao Kuang said that the tree demon had bewitched him and burned him to death. When the great scholar heard this, he felt indignant for the tree demon. Everyone knew that the great scholar had lent books to Zhao Kuang, but Zhao Kuang said that his success was all due to his talent and that it had nothing to do with the great scholar borrowing books.